Hey there, welcome to Broderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. A romance with a mystery. It started with a question, one that I often ask myself on quiet nights when shadows stretched across my room like fingers creeping over a cold surface. What if the person you thought you knew wasn't who they seemed? It was a thought that lingered, nagging at the back of my mind like a distant echo, foreboding yet enticing. My life had been a series of monotonous days, the kind that blend into each other, but that all changed when I met her. Her name was Clara, and our first encounter was as ordinary as any, set against the backdrop of a bustling cafe where the aroma of roasted coffee mingled with the sweet scent of pastries. She sat alone at a table near the window, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup, her gaze lost somewhere outside. It was the subtle intensity in her dark eyes that drew me in, a depth that hinted at secrets just below the surface. I couldn't resist the urge to approach her, drawn by an invisible thread that tugged at my very core. "Is this seat taken?" I asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. She looked up, her expression shifting from distant to curious, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Not at all," she replied, her voice soft yet tinged with an unplaceable edge. We talked for what felt like hours, exchanging stories about our lives, our dreams, our fears. But with each word she spoke, I could sense an undercurrent, a tension woven through her laughter. It was there in the way she avoided certain topics, as if they were shadows lurking just out of sight. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cafe, I felt a pull towards her, a magnetic attraction that was both thrilling and alarming. I wanted to know everything about her, to peel back the layers that seemed so tightly wound. But even then, a whisper in my mind cautioned me to tread carefully. Days turned into weeks, and our connection deepened. I learned that Clara had moved to the city recently, escaping a past she rarely spoke of. She would share snippets, enough to keep me intrigued but not enough to satisfy my curiosity. There were hints of heartache and loss, moments when her laughter would falter and a shadow would cross her face. But she always brushed it off with a wave of her hand, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I was captivated by her complexity, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking beneath the surface, a darkness that seemed to breathe just out of reach. As I fell deeper into this romance, I began to notice strange occurrences. Late-night calls she would take in hushed tones, her sudden shifts in mood that left me bewildered. One night, while we were watching a movie at my apartment, I caught her staring into the corner of the room, her expression a mix of fear and sorrow. "Are you all right?" I asked, my heart racing. She snapped back to reality, forcing a smile. Just a moment of déjà vu, I suppose. But I could tell it was more than that. The weight of her secrets hung in the air between us, thick and palpable, and with each passing day, the tension grew. My curiosity turned to obsession. I needed to uncover the truth behind Clara's past, to understand the shadows that danced behind her eyes. But I was unprepared for what I would find, and as I dug deeper, I realized that sometimes ignorance is bliss. In the weeks that followed our initial meeting, I found myself consumed by thoughts of Clara. Each morning, I would wake with her name on my lips, a mantra that danced through my mind as I sipped my coffee and stared out the window. Our encounters became the highlight of my day. Yet, with every shared moment, the underlying tension between us intensified, wrapping around my heart like a creeping vine. One evening, we decided to take a stroll through the city. The streets were alive with energy, illuminated by neon signs and the laughter of strangers. Clara walked beside me, her presence magnetic, drawing me in as the city pulsed around us. As we passed by a bookstore, she paused, her gaze fixated on the display window, which showcased a collection of old books. "Have you ever read The Dark Side of the Mind?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, intrigued. "No, what's it about?" "It explores the hidden aspects of the human psyche, the secrets we keep even from ourselves," she replied, her eyes glinting with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. Sometimes, the past can be haunting. A shiver of unease shot through me, yet I couldn't resist the pull to delve deeper into her world. "What's haunting you, Clara?" I asked, my curiosity getting the better of me. She turned to me, her expression unreadable. "We all have our ghosts," she said cryptically. "Some are just better at hiding." Her words lingered in the air like a fog, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The night continued, but I couldn't shake off the weight of her statement. As we wandered through the streets, I noticed how she flinched at sudden sounds, a car horn, the laughter of a group of friends. Each time, her eyes darted around as if searching for something or someone. I wanted to ask her what she feared, but I could sense the walls she had built around her heart. As days turned into nights filled with unease, I began to piece together the fragments of her life that she let slip during our conversations. I learned that she had grown up in a small town where everyone knew each other's business. "It's suffocating," she had said one night, her voice laced with bitterness. "You can't escape your past when everyone reminds you of it." One evening, as we sat on the roof of my apartment building, the city skyline spread out before us like a shimmering blanket of stars, I dared to bring up the subject again. "Clara, I care about you. I want to help, but I need to know what you're dealing with." She turned her head, her eyes reflecting the starlight. For a moment, I thought she would open up, but instead, she laughed softly, a sound that felt more like a mask than genuine amusement. "You don't want to know, trust me. Sometimes it's better to keep things buried." But I couldn't let it go. I sensed the darkness that surrounded her, an invisible shroud that whispered of danger. I felt compelled to dig deeper, to uncover the truth that lay hidden beneath her enigmatic smile. And so, I began my quiet investigation. I started with her social media, scrolling through her posts, searching for any clue that might shed light on her past. I found pictures of her with friends, but they were always taken from a distance, as if she preferred to remain on the outskirts of her own life. I noted her interactions, the lack of close connections, and a nagging feeling settled in my chest. It was clear she was protecting herself, but from what? My obsession led me to reach out to mutual acquaintances, those who had crossed paths with her. Each time, I received vague responses that only deepened my confusion. "Clara is a mystery," one friend said with a chuckle. "She keeps to herself, but she's got a wild side if you can get her to open up." Another person spoke in hushed tones about her moving away, implying she was escaping something. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, and I felt the pressure mounting. Clara seemed to sense my unease, and during one of our quieter moments, she pulled me close, her fingers tracing my jawline. "You have to promise me something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "No matter what you find out, don't let it change how you feel about me." Her words echoed in my mind, a haunting promise that sent shivers down my spine. "I promise," I said, though deep down, I knew that every secret uncovered would change the dynamic of our relationship. Little did I know that the truth behind Clara's dark past would come crashing down like a tidal wave, dragging me into a storm I never anticipated. The shadows that lingered around her were closing in, and I was about to be swept away into a world of danger and deception, where nothing was as it seemed, and the line between love and fear would blur beyond recognition. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between us grew, coiling tighter around my heart with each passing moment. Clara's unpredictable behavior haunted my thoughts. One evening, after a particularly intense conversation about her past, I noticed a flicker of panic cross her face. It happened when we were watching a movie. A character on the screen had a resemblance to someone from her past, someone she had never mentioned. Clara's eyes widened, and she clutched the arm of the couch, her breathing quickening. "Are you okay?" I asked, concern edging my voice. She snapped back to the present, her expression morphing from fear to indifference in an instant. "Just a moment of weakness," she replied, her tone light but her eyes betraying a storm beneath the surface. "Let's not dwell on it." But I couldn't shake the feeling that the facade she wore was slipping, and beneath it lay a tempest of emotions she couldn't contain. It was as if I were watching a fragile mask shatter into 1,000 pieces, each fragment revealing a glimpse of the darkness she was trying to hide. I wanted to help, but my attempts to pry deeper often ended in frustration. "Why don't you just tell me?" I urged one night as we walked along the riverbank, the moonlight casting shimmering reflections on the water's surface. Clara stopped abruptly, turning to face me. "Because you wouldn't understand," she said, her voice tight. "Some things are better left unsaid." I felt a pang of rejection, a sense of helplessness as she pulled away emotionally, and I couldn't comprehend why she kept pushing me away. Yet, my curiosity, mixed with growing concern, morphed into an obsession. I began to explore the darker corners of her life, delving into the places she had come from, and what I discovered sent shivers down my spine. One late night, fueled by a combination of caffeine and anxiety, I found myself on the internet, searching for any mention of Clara's name. After several hours of fruitless searching, I stumbled upon an article buried deep in the archives of a local news site. The headline sent a chill racing through me. "Mysterious disappearance in small town sparks theories of abduction." The article detailed the case of several women who had gone missing in her hometown. Clara's name was mentioned only briefly in a statement from a friend who claimed she had left town after the last incident. My heart raced as I read through the details, each line confirming my worst fears. Clara had left behind a life shrouded in mystery, one that had been marked by fear and loss. I was thrust into a whirlwind of anxiety and suspicion, questioning everything I thought I knew about her. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more horrifying than the last. Had she been involved in something sinister? Was she escaping from someone, or was it her past that haunted her? The next time I saw her, I couldn't hold back my questions. We met at our usual cafe, the atmosphere warm and inviting, but the tension crackled between us like static electricity. I studied her face, searching for any signs of deception, any hint of the secrets she kept. "Clara, I found something," I started, but she cut me off, her eyes narrowing. "I told you not to dig into my past," she snapped, her voice low but fierce. "You're only going to hurt yourself. Why can't you just trust me? I want to understand." I shot back, frustration bubbling over. Her gaze softened for just a moment, and I thought I saw a flicker of vulnerability. "You don't know what you're asking for," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm not the person you think I am." The weight of her words settled between us, heavy and suffocating. I felt as though I were standing on the edge of a cliff, teetering over an abyss. "Then tell me the truth, Clara." I want to help you. She sighed, a deep, shuddering breath that echoed the turmoil within her. You don't know what you're asking. There are things I can't explain, things I don't even understand myself. My past, it's like a shadow that never leaves. Before I could respond, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A figure stood at the edge of the cafe, partially obscured by shadows, watching us. My heart raced as I turned to look, but when I glanced back, Clara was staring intently at the figure, her expression shifting from fear to recognition. Clara? I asked, confusion swirling in my mind. She stood abruptly, her face pale. We have to go, she said, grabbing my hand. Now. I felt panic grip me as she led me out of the cafe and into the cool night air. The figure in the shadows had disappeared, but the urgency in Clara's movements sent alarm bells ringing in my head. Where are we going? I demanded, my heart pounding. I'll explain later, she replied, her grip tightening on my hand. Just trust me. We walked quickly through the dimly lit streets, the weight of our secrets heavy between us. My mind raced with questions, but one stood out above the rest. What was it that made her so terrified? As we rounded a corner, Clara suddenly stopped, her eyes darting around. I think we're being followed, she whispered, panic lacing her voice. Followed? By who? I don't know. But we can't stay here, she insisted, pulling me into an alleyway, the shadows swallowing us whole. My heart raced as I pressed against the cold brick wall, the air thick with tension. The world outside faded into a blur as I focused solely on Clara. Her breath came in quick, shallow gasps, and I could see the fear in her eyes. Clara, talk to me. What's happening? I urged, my voice barely a whisper. I'll tell you everything, but first we need to get out of sight. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I glanced back toward the street, straining to see if anyone was there. The uncertainty gnawed at me, and I realized I was standing at the precipice of something far darker than I had anticipated. Whatever Clara was running from, it was about to catch up with us, and I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole truly went. The alley was enveloped in darkness, the only sounds the distant hum of the city and the rapid beating of my heart. Clara's breath was quick and shallow beside me, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. I felt a rush of adrenaline flood my system, and for a moment, I questioned my own sanity. I had chased shadows, but now I found myself in a real-life nightmare, unsure of who to trust. Clara, I whispered urgently, who's following us? What's going on? She shook her head, her expression tight with fear. I can't explain right now. Just stay close to me. We pressed ourselves against the cold brick wall, its rough surface grounding me in the moment as panic threatened to engulf us. I peered cautiously around the corner, scanning the street for any sign of movement. The city seemed alive with the sounds of laughter and music, a stark contrast to the dread that clung to us like a shroud. Please, just tell me what you're afraid of, I implored, turning back to face her. The urgency in her gaze sent another shiver through me. Clara looked down, her hands trembling as she fidgeted with the hem of her sweater. It's not just about me, she whispered. It's about what I left behind. Sometimes, it feels like the past is stalking me. I thought I could escape, but... Her voice trailed off, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. But what? I pressed gently, hoping to draw her out of the darkness that enveloped her. There are people who don't want me to be found, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I was involved in something dangerous. And now, I can't shake the feeling that they're watching me. The weight of her words hung heavy between us. I felt a mixture of fear and determination swirl inside me. I had never imagined that Clara could be connected to something sinister, yet the way she spoke, her conviction, made my skin prickle with unease. "We need to get out of here," I said, urgency creeping into my voice. "Can we go back to my apartment? It's safe there." She hesitated, glancing back towards the street as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. "I don't know if that's a good idea. What if they know where you live?" My heart sank. "Then where do we go?" "I have a place we can go, but it's risky," she replied, her eyes searching mine for understanding. I nodded, willing to follow her lead despite the gnawing dread that threatened to overwhelm me. "Lead the way," I urged, attempting to project confidence. Clara took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Stay close," she warned, stepping into the narrow alleyway that branched off from ours. The dim light from the street lamp flickered above us as we ventured deeper into the labyrinth of shadows, the air thick with tension. Every sound felt amplified, the distant clinking of bottles, the murmur of voices, the rustle of plastic bags in the wind. I kept my eyes peeled for any sign of danger, my heart pounding in rhythm with my footsteps. The further we went, the more I felt the grip of fear tighten around my chest. Eventually, we emerged onto a deserted street, lined with old brick buildings that seemed to huddle together, their windows dark and foreboding. Clara led me toward a small, unmarked door set into the side of a dilapidated building. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but her desperate gaze held me in place. "This is it," she said, her voice steady but low. "We can hide here for a while." I nodded, trying to suppress the growing sense of dread. As Clara unlocked the door, I noticed her hands were shaking. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit staircase that spiraled downward into darkness. "After you," I said, forcing a casual tone that masked my apprehension. Clara stepped inside, and I followed, the door closing behind us with a soft thud that echoed in the silence. The air was cooler here, carrying a musty scent that reminded me of forgotten places. We descended the stairs, the wooden steps creaking under our weight, until we reached a small, dimly lit basement. A single light bulb swung from the ceiling, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. It was a cramped space, filled with mismatched furniture and boxes piled high. "This is where I used to stay when things got complicated," Clara explained, glancing around as if expecting something or someone to jump out from the shadows. I could sense her apprehension. "Are you sure it's safe here?" "It should be," she replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I've been here before. No one knows I come here." I took a moment to survey the space, trying to find comfort in its familiarity. The walls were lined with peeling paint, and an old couch sat in the corner, its fabric frayed and stained. A single window, barely big enough to be considered a real escape, was covered with a thick curtain, shrouding us from the outside world. "Do you have any food or water?" I asked, trying to keep my mind focused on the practical. "There's some bottled water in the fridge," she said, pointing to a small kitchen area tucked away behind a wall. "And a few snacks." "Not much." "Let's grab what we can," I suggested, moving toward the kitchen. As I rummaged through the shelves, Clara sat down on the edge of the couch, her gaze lost in thought. I filled my arms with a couple of bottles of water and some granola bars. When I turned back to her, her expression was distant, as if she were battling invisible demons. "Clara, talk to me," I urged, setting the supplies down on a small table. "You need to tell me what's going on." I can't help you if I don't know what I'm dealing with. She took a deep breath, her eyes finally meeting mine. I thought I could start fresh, she began, her voice trembling. But my past, it keeps resurfacing. There are people who want to punish me for what I did. What did you do? I pressed gently, the urgency in my voice tempered by concern. I was part of something, a group that got involved in things we shouldn't have. It started as a way to survive, to make quick money. But it spiraled out of control, and I lost people I cared about. Her voice cracked, and I could see tears welling in her eyes. I thought I could leave it behind, but they're still out there, and they won't let me go. A chill ran down my spine as I processed her words. This was no longer just a romantic entanglement. I was entangled in a web of danger that stretched far beyond anything I had ever known. Clara, do you think they're looking for you now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, she admitted, her hands clenching into fists. But I can't shake the feeling that they're watching me. It's like I can sense them, lurking in the shadows. My heart raced as I absorbed her fear. The gravity of her past pressed down on me, and I felt a surge of protectiveness. We'll figure this out, I promised, trying to reassure both her and myself. But we need to be smart about it. We can't let them find us. She nodded, but her eyes betrayed the turmoil beneath her composed facade. I knew that whatever came next would change everything between us. As we settled into the cramped space, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were teetering on the edge of a precipice, and one misstep could send us plummeting into darkness. The shadows whispered around us, carrying secrets that were long buried, and I realized that Clara's past was not just a story, it was a living, breathing entity that had the power to destroy everything we had begun to build. As the silence deepened, I could feel the air grow thicker with unspoken fears and hidden truths. Clara's past was a looming specter, casting a long shadow over us in this dim basement. I had thought I understood her, but now I realized that every layer I peeled back revealed something darker, something more dangerous than I had ever imagined. What did you mean when you said they won't let you go? I asked, my voice steady but filled with trepidation. Are you talking about the people you were involved with? She nodded, the weight of her past pressing down on her shoulders. Yes. There was a group, a gang, really. We did things, illegal things. At first, it felt like we were just trying to survive, but then it became about power, money. I got too close to things I shouldn't have. Her words hung heavy in the air, and I felt my pulse quicken. What kind of things? I pressed gently, desperate to understand. Clara took a shaky breath, her eyes glazing over as she recalled her past. Drug deals, theft, things that put people in danger. I thought I could control it, but then people started getting hurt. I had to get out before I became one of them. I searched her eyes, hoping to find a glimmer of the woman I had fallen for, but all I saw was a deep well of sorrow. Did you hurt anyone? No, she exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. I never wanted to hurt anyone. But some of my friends, they didn't make it out. I couldn't bear it anymore, so I ran. But they don't just let people leave like that. The raw pain in her voice struck me to my core. Clara, I'm here now. You don't have to go through this alone, I said softly, stepping closer to her. She looked at me, her expression a mix of gratitude and despair. I appreciate that, but you don't understand what you're getting into. If they find out I'm with you, then we'll figure it out together, I insisted, my resolve hardening. We'll stay one step ahead of them. I won't let them take you away from me. For a moment, A flicker of hope sparked in her eyes, but it quickly dimmed. "You don't know what you're saying," she murmured, her gaze dropping to the floor. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my mind. "So what do we do now?" I asked, needing a plan, something to hold onto amidst the chaos. Clara chewed her lip, contemplating. "We need to stay low for a while. I have some contacts who might be able to help us, but they're not exactly trustworthy. It's risky, but it's the only way." "Contacts?" I echoed, skepticism creeping into my voice. "How do we know they won't lead us right into a trap?" "I've worked with them before," she replied, her eyes earnest. "But I can't guarantee anything. All I know is that they might know how to keep me safe." "Then let's reach out to them," I said, my determination strengthening. "What do we need to do?" She pulled out her phone, its screen dim from lack of use, and began to scroll through her contacts. "I have a friend named Mia. She was part of the group, but she managed to get out before it got too dangerous. She might have information." As Clara typed out a message, I couldn't shake the feeling of foreboding settling over me. Who was this Mia, and could we really trust her? But there was no time for doubt. We needed to act quickly. "Should we meet her somewhere?" I asked, scanning the room as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. "Yeah, but we need to be careful. I can't use my usual contact methods. If they're watching me," her voice trailed off, and I could see the fear etched on her face. I stepped closer, wrapping my arms around her. "We'll figure this out. I promise," I whispered, feeling her body tense against mine. After a moment, she pulled back and nodded, her expression resolute. "Okay, I'll text her and see if she can meet us. We should choose a public place, somewhere busy." Clara sent the message, her fingers flying over the screen. As we waited in tense silence, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the danger pressing on us. The shadows seemed to stretch further, creeping closer as if they were alive, hungry for the secrets we held. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. "She's willing to meet us at a diner downtown in about an hour," Clara said, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Great. Let's get moving then," I urged, feeling the urgency of the moment. "We can't stay here much longer." Clara grabbed her coat, and as we stepped back into the cool night air, I felt a chill run down my spine. The streets were eerily quiet, the lights flickering like dying stars. We walked briskly, trying to blend into the night as my mind raced with possibilities. What if Mia turned out to be a trap? What if they were already watching us? "Just stay close to me," Clara murmured, and I could sense her own anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. The diner was a few blocks away, but each step felt like an eternity. I glanced over my shoulder frequently, scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. The city was alive around us, but the atmosphere felt charged, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. When we finally reached the diner, the neon lights flickered with a nostalgic glow. We pushed through the heavy glass door, the bell ringing above us as we stepped inside. The scent of greasy food and stale coffee filled the air, mingling with the sound of clattering dishes and hushed conversations. "Let's sit in the back," Clara suggested, her voice low as she led the way to a booth tucked away from the main crowd. As we settled in, I could see Clara's nerves return in full force. Her hands fidgeted in her lap, and her eyes darted toward the entrance. "What if Mia doesn't show?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the din. "She will," I reassured her, though I felt the same gnawing doubt in my gut. "If she's as trustworthy as you say." Minutes dragged on, each tick of the clock amplifying the tension between us. Clara picked at the laminated menu, her eyes unfocused as she chewed on her lip. I wanted to reach out and comfort her, to reassure her that everything would be all right, but I was acutely aware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface of her calm exterior. Finally, just as I began to lose hope, the bell above the door jingled, and a woman stepped inside. She was tall with an edgy haircut, wearing a leather jacket that clung to her frame. My heart skipped a beat as I watched her scan the diner, her gaze landing on our booth. "There she is," Clara said, her voice a mixture of relief and anxiety. As Mia approached, I could see the tension in Clara's shoulders ease slightly, though apprehension still lingered. "Hey," Mia said as she slid into the booth across from us. "Thanks for meeting me." "Thanks for coming," Clara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Mia's eyes shifted between us, her expression unreadable. "I got your message." "What's going on?" Clara hesitated, glancing at me before nodding. "I need your help. I'm in trouble, and I don't know how long I can stay safe." Mia leaned forward, her expression serious. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that doesn't go away easily," Clara replied, her voice steadying. "I thought I was free, but my past is coming back to haunt me." I watched as Mia's demeanor shifted, a flash of understanding passing between them. "You need to lay low, then," she said, her voice low. "They can be relentless." Clara nodded, her gaze intense. "Do you know how I can stay safe?" "I need to disappear." "I might have some connections," Mia said cautiously, "but it's not going to be easy. You're not the only one they're looking for. If they think you're a liability." The air thickened with tension as the weight of Mia's words settled over us. I glanced at Clara, whose eyes were wide, her expression stricken with fear. "Just tell me what I need to do," she said, determination rising in her voice. "First, you need to change your appearance," Mia replied. "They'll be watching you. We need to throw them off your trail." "I can do that," Clara said, her voice firm. "What else?" "Stay away from places you know. Don't use your phone or social media. It's all too risky right now. I can help you find a place to stay, but it will take time." "I'm willing to do whatever it takes," Clara said, her resolve solidifying. Mia glanced around the diner, her expression growing cautious. "We should leave soon. I don't like how exposed we are here." "Right," I agreed, feeling the weight of our situation pressing down on me. "Let's go." As we stood to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The shadows seemed to stretch around us, wrapping tighter with each step we took. I glanced back at the diner, its warm glow contrasting sharply with the darkness outside, and a sense of foreboding settled over me. "What's our next move?" I asked as we stepped outside, the cool night air hitting me like a wave. "We need to find a safe place to talk," Mia said, scanning the street. "Follow me." We walked in silence, the city streets alive around us but feeling hauntingly empty. I kept a close watch on Clara, noticing how her posture had changed. She was no longer the confident woman I had met. Now, she seemed fragile, as if the weight of her past threatened to crush her at any moment. Mia led us through a series of back alleys, her movements quick and deliberate. "Stay close," she urged, her voice low. "We can't afford to be seen." As we turned a corner, a flicker of movement caught my eye, a figure lingering in the shadows. My heart raced as the figure melted away into the darkness, leaving only the echo of footsteps behind. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my voice tense. Mia glanced over her shoulder, her expression tightening. Keep moving. We hurried through the alley, my pulse quickening as we reached a nondescript door. Mia pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with old furniture and boxes stacked high against the walls. It felt like a hiding place, a sanctuary amidst the chaos outside. Stay here for now, Mia instructed, her voice steady. I'll see if I can get some supplies and make a few calls. Clara nodded, her eyes wide with uncertainty. What if they find us? They won't, Mia assured her, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. Just stay quiet and wait for me. As Mia slipped out of the room, Clara and I were left in the silence, the weight of our situation hanging heavily in the air. Do you think she'll be okay? Clara asked, her voice small. I hope so, I replied, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. We need her help, and she seems to know what she's doing. Clara sank onto a nearby chair, her fingers nervously tapping against the wood. I can't believe this is happening, she murmured. I thought I could leave it all behind. I crossed the room and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in mine. You're not alone in this, Clara. We'll figure it out together. She looked up at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm scared, but I don't want to lose you. You won't, I promised, squeezing her hand gently. We'll find a way out of this. As we sat there in the dim light, I could feel the tension easing slightly, but the sense of foreboding never left me. The shadows still lingered, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Hours passed in anxious silence, and just as I began to lose hope, the door creaked open and Mia stepped back inside, her expression grim. I've got some supplies, she said, her voice low. But we need to move again. They might have seen us. Where do we go? Clara asked, her eyes wide with fear. There's a safe house a few blocks away, Mia replied, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone to follow. It's our best bet right now. But we need to hurry. I nodded, my heart racing as we gathered our things. Clara's fear was palpable, but I could see a flicker of determination in her eyes. She was a survivor, and I vowed to help her through this no matter the cost. As we stepped back into the night, the shadows danced around us, whispering secrets of the past that threatened to pull us under. But I refused to let them take Clara from me. We would fight back together, and whatever came next, we would face it side by side. As we stepped back into the night, the shadows danced around us, their whispers weaving through the cool air. My heart raced as I felt the weight of our circumstances pressing down on me. With Mia leading the way, Clara and I followed closely, the tension between us palpable. The city was alive with noise, the distant sounds of laughter and car horns a stark contrast to the anxiety bubbling within. Each step felt like a gamble, a chance that we might be caught in the web of Clara's past. I glanced at her, trying to gauge her emotions, but her face was a mask of determination and fear. We moved swiftly, weaving through alleys and sidestepping clusters of people, careful not to draw attention to ourselves. Mia's quick pace led us down side streets, her eyes scanning the surroundings, ever watchful for threats lurking in the dark. Is this safe? Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper as we turned down another narrow passageway, dimly lit by flickering street lamps. For now, yes, Mia replied, glancing back at us. But we need to keep moving. The longer we stay in one place, the more vulnerable we become. We reached a corner where the street opened up into a small park, its benches empty under the soft glow of lamplight. We can rest here for a moment, Mia suggested, but her tone was cautious. "Just keep your heads down." We found a secluded bench, and as we sat, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My eyes flickered to the shadows, but there was nothing, just the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Clara's fingers intertwined with mine, her grip firm as if drawing strength from our connection. "Where exactly is this safe house?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation light but aware of the tension simmering beneath the surface. "It's an old apartment building that belongs to a friend of mine," Mia explained, her gaze darting around the park. "He's trustworthy and knows how to keep people hidden." "Hidden from what?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "What kind of danger are we facing?" Mia hesitated, her eyes narrowing as she considered her words. "The kind that doesn't forgive. Clara's past involves some dangerous people, gangs that don't take kindly to anyone trying to leave. If they find her..." "Then what?" Clara interjected, her voice shaking slightly. "What will they do to me?" Mia's expression turned grave. "It's not pretty. They won't just let you walk away. You've seen things, and they want to make sure you don't talk. Or worse." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do we do if they come after us?" I asked, the fear creeping into my voice. "Stick together and stay alert," Mia replied, her tone firm. "We'll move when it's safe. I know how to navigate these streets. Just trust me." Clara nodded, though her eyes betrayed her anxiety. I squeezed her hand, willing her to draw strength from our bond. "We'll make it through this," I reassured her, though I wasn't sure I believed my own words. As we sat in silence, the shadows grew longer, stretching ominously as the night deepened. I could hear the distant sounds of sirens and laughter, a reminder of the normalcy we were desperately trying to cling to. But for us, normal was slipping away, replaced by a reality that felt increasingly dangerous. After what felt like an eternity, Mia stood up, scanning the area once more. "We need to move," she said urgently. "The longer we stay here, the more likely it is someone will see us." We rose from the bench, and I could feel Clara's heartbeat racing in time with my own as we resumed our hurried pace. The streets felt claustrophobic, the shadows closing in around us. My mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead, of the dangers that lurked in the dark corners of our lives. Mia led us through a labyrinth of back alleys, her confidence guiding us as we navigated the maze of the city. With each turn, the atmosphere shifted, becoming heavier, charged with a sense of impending doom. I could feel Clara's anxiety growing, her breaths quickening as she stayed close to my side. "Just a little further," Mia assured us, her voice steady. "We're almost there." As we approached an unmarked door, my heart raced with apprehension. Mia knocked softly, and a moment later, a man opened the door, his expression cautious but welcoming. "Get in quickly," he urged, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting trouble to follow us. We stepped inside, the door closing behind us with a soft click that echoed in the silence. The apartment was dimly lit, filled with mismatched furniture and the scent of something savory wafting from the kitchen. It felt like a refuge, a sanctuary from the storm outside. "This is Paul," Mia introduced, gesturing to the man. "He's going to help us." "Nice to meet you," Paul said, his voice calm but tinged with urgency. "You're safe here for now, but we need to lay low. Can I give you anything? Water? Food?" "Just water, please," Clara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I could see the tension in her shoulders easing slightly as we settled into the cramped living room. Paul disappeared into the kitchen, and I turned to Clara, hoping to reassure her. This is a good place, I said softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. We'll figure everything out here. She nodded, but I could see the lingering fear in her eyes. What if they find us? They won't, I assured her, though I felt the weight of uncertainty creeping in. We'll stay one step ahead. Mia knows what she's doing. Mia returned with glasses of water, handing them out as we took a moment to breathe. We'll have to come up with a plan, she said, her expression serious. They might already be looking for you, Clara. We need to make sure you stay off their radar. What do we do? Clara asked, her voice trembling slightly. We'll need to create a new identity for you, Mia explained. It's not easy, but it's possible. We'll get you a new phone, a new name. It's risky, but it's the best way to keep you safe. Clara looked at me, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. But what about you? What if they find you? I'm prepared for that, Mia said, her tone firm. I know how to handle this. We just need to stay calm and stick to the plan. As we sat in the dim light, I could feel the weight of our situation pressing down on us. Clara's past was a looming shadow, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it would catch up to us eventually. But I refused to let that fear control me. We would fight back, no matter what it took. Paul returned and settled into a chair across from us, his expression grave. You're not just dealing with a few angry people, he warned. This is bigger than that. Clara's past is tied to something dangerous. What do you mean? I asked, my heart racing. There are forces at play that you don't fully understand, Paul explained. This gang has connections. They won't stop until they get what they want. Clara's expression turned pale, the gravity of his words hitting her like a punch to the gut. What do they want? She whispered. Control, Mia answered, her voice low. They want to ensure that no one leaves. They want to silence anyone who knows their secrets. I could see Clara struggling with the reality of her situation, her mind racing. I thought I could escape, she murmured, her voice shaking. But now it feels like I'm trapped again. You're not trapped, I said firmly, taking her hand in mine. We'll find a way out. Together. As we strategized, the hours slipped away, the darkness outside thickening like a storm cloud gathering strength. I could feel the shadows creeping closer, whispering of danger and despair. But as long as I had Clara by my side, I knew we could face whatever came next. As the night deepened, I could sense that we were running out of time. I glanced at the clock, my stomach tightening with anxiety. What if they found us before we could execute our plan? The world outside felt menacing, each noise amplified, echoing our fear. But amid the uncertainty, a flicker of hope remained. Clara needed me, and I would do everything in my power to keep her safe. As the minutes ticked by in Paul's dimly lit apartment, the air thickened with tension. Clara and I sat close together, our fingers intertwined as if holding onto each other would shield us from the dangers lurking outside. Mia and Paul exchanged whispers, their expressions grave, their focus entirely on the plan unfolding before us. Okay, here's what we'll do, Mia said, her voice steady, cutting through the heaviness. We need to create a new identity for Clara and get her out of here as soon as possible. Paul, you have contacts, right? Paul nodded, his brow furrowed. I can reach out to a few people, but we need to move quickly. The longer we stay here, the more likely they'll track us down. Track us down? Clara's voice trembled, fear seeping into her words. Who are they? What do they want? Mia turned to her, her gaze softening slightly. They're part of a larger network involved in some serious criminal activity. When you tried to leave, you disrupted their operations. They won't let you go without a fight. I felt a chill run down my spine as I grasped the enormity of what Clara had been entangled in. This was no ordinary situation. We were standing at the edge of a dark abyss, and I wasn't sure how far down it went. "Are you sure we can trust these contacts?" I asked, glancing at Paul, who met my gaze with a determined nod. "They're trustworthy," he assured us. "But I can't promise it'll be safe. We need to keep our heads down and avoid attracting attention. If they sense something is off, they'll come looking for Clara." Clara leaned closer to me, her breath shaky. "What if they find us first?" "We'll do everything we can to stay ahead of them," Mia replied, her voice firm. "You've been in hiding for a long time, Clara. We'll use that to our advantage." "Yeah," I added, trying to project confidence. "You know how to stay out of sight. We just need to think smart." Paul returned to the conversation, his expression thoughtful. "I can arrange a meeting with a friend who specializes in creating new identities. He's been in the game for years, and he knows how to make it look legitimate." "Can we trust him?" I asked, still on edge. "He's never let me down," Paul replied, crossing his arms. "But there's no time to waste. I'll make the call now and set it up. We need to leave soon." As Paul stepped into the other room to make the call, I turned back to Clara. "How are you holding up?" I asked, squeezing her hand gently. "I don't know," she confessed, her voice trembling. "It feels like I'm living in a nightmare. I thought I was finally free. I thought I could build a new life, but now it feels like I'm running in circles." "You are free," I insisted. "We just have to navigate this chaos. We'll get you a new life, a fresh start. I promise." She looked into my eyes, searching for reassurance, and I could see the fear mixed with hope flickering within her. "What if they find me?" she whispered again, the weight of her past pressing down on her. "We won't let that happen," I vowed, my voice low but determined. "You're not alone in this. I'm right here with you." Mia returned, her face set in concentration. "Paul's made the call. We need to leave in 10 minutes. His contact is meeting us at a nearby cafe. It's the safest place we could find." "Is it far?" I asked, glancing at Clara, who seemed to shrink into herself. "Just a few blocks," Mia replied. "We'll take the back streets to avoid any unnecessary exposure." "Let's go then," I urged, rising to my feet. Clara stood as well, her grip on my hand tightening. I could sense her anxiety, and I wished I could shield her from the looming dread. As we stepped out into the night, the cool air hit us like a splash of cold water, refreshing yet filled with an underlying tension. The streets were quieter now, the sounds of laughter and life muted as we navigated through the shadows. Mia led the way, her movements swift and deliberate. I kept a protective arm around Clara, feeling the tremors of her nervousness in my touch. Each step felt heavy with uncertainty, a reminder of the precariousness of our situation. "Stay close," Mia instructed, glancing over her shoulder. "We're almost there." The streetlights flickered ominously, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out toward us. I kept scanning the darkness, my instincts on high alert, as if expecting someone to leap out from the shadows at any moment. "What if we get caught?" Clara whispered, her voice strained. "We won't," I replied, my heart racing. "Just keep moving. Focus on what comes next. We reached a corner, and Mia paused, scanning the street ahead. "The cafe is just around the block," she said. "Stay behind me." As we rounded the corner, I caught sight of the cafe, a small, unassuming place with an inviting glow spilling from its windows. But as we approached, an unsettling feeling washed over me. I felt as if we were stepping into a trap, the shadows closing in around us like a noose tightening with each passing second. Mia pushed open the door, and we slipped inside, the warmth of the cafe wrapping around us like a blanket. The familiar scent of coffee and baked goods filled the air, but I couldn't shake the unease gnawing at my gut. "Stay close," Mia whispered again, leading us to a small table in the corner. "We'll wait for Paul's contact." Clara and I sat down, and I could feel her trembling slightly, the reality of our situation crashing down on her. I leaned closer, murmuring, "Just a little longer, and we'll figure this out." She nodded, though her eyes were wide with fear. I could sense her apprehension, and it tore at my heart to see her so vulnerable. Minutes passed, each tick of the clock echoing louder than the last. I kept glancing at the door, my heart racing at every noise, every person that entered. What if they were already here? What if they had followed us? "Do you think Paul is okay?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I hope so," I replied, forcing a calmness into my tone. "He's done this before. He knows how to keep his head down." Just then, the bell above the cafe door jingled, and a figure stepped inside, scanning the room with sharp, assessing eyes. My heart dropped as I recognized Paul's friend, an older man with a thick beard and an air of confidence about him. "There he is," I whispered to Clara, feeling a rush of relief. The man approached our table, and I noticed the way he carried himself, steady, assured, yet there was something in his eyes that spoke of hardship, of battles fought and lost. "I'm Tom," he said, extending his hand to Mia, who shook it firmly. "Let's get down to business. I hear you're in a bit of a bind." "We are," Mia replied, her tone serious. "We need to get Clara out of sight and set her up with a new identity." Tom nodded, his gaze shifting to Clara, assessing her in a way that made me tense. "We can make that happen. But it won't be easy, and you'll need to follow my instructions closely." Clara swallowed hard, her fear palpable as she looked between Mia and Tom. "What do I have to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "First, we need to get you a new phone and remove any trace of your old life," Tom said. "We'll set up a new name and a new history. It will take time, but it's crucial that we do it right." "Will they find me?" Clara's voice cracked, and I could see the anxiety swirling in her eyes. "Not if we do this carefully," Tom assured her. "But you have to trust me and stay hidden until we're sure it's safe." I could see Clara nodding, though uncertainty lingered in her gaze. I leaned in closer, offering my support. "We're in this together, Clara. We'll figure it out." "All right, let's move," Mia said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Tom, do you have everything we need?" "I do," Tom replied, glancing out the window. "But we need to hurry. The longer we stay, the more chance someone will notice something is off." As we prepared to leave, I felt a rush of determination wash over me. This was our chance, a chance to start fresh, to break free from the shadows of Clara's past. But as I looked at Clara, I could see the fear etched on her face. I knew we had to be smart and cautious. "Stick together," I whispered to her as we gathered our things. "We can do this." With our hearts pounding, we stepped back out into the night, the shadows closing in around us once more. But this time, we had a plan, and I would do everything in my power to keep Clara safe. The cool night air greeted us as we stepped out of the cafe, and a surge of adrenaline coursed through me. I kept a firm grip on Clara's hand, determined to shield her from the dangers lurking just beyond the streetlights. We moved with purpose, our footsteps echoing against the pavement as we made our way down the dimly lit alleyway. Tom led the way, glancing over his shoulder frequently, his sharp eyes scanning for any signs of trouble. Mia walked beside him, her expression a mix of focus and concern. Clara and I followed closely, our hearts racing as we navigated the darkened streets. Each shadow seemed to loom larger, each whisper of the wind felt like a warning. "This way," Tom instructed, turning down a narrow path that led to a parking lot shrouded in darkness. I parked my car around the back. As we rounded the corner, the headlights of a sleek black sedan came into view, its paint reflecting the moonlight. Tom moved quickly to the driver's side, unlocking the doors with a soft click. "Get in," he urged, glancing around as if expecting someone to leap from the shadows at any moment. I helped Clara into the back seat, sliding in beside her. Tom and Mia settled into the front, and I could see Mia whispering something to Tom as he started the engine. The low hum of the car was a stark contrast to the tension that crackled in the air. "Where are we going?" Clara asked, her voice trembling slightly as she looked at me, her eyes wide with anxiety. "To a safe house," Tom replied, his focus unwavering on the road ahead. "It's off the grid, and we'll have time to plan our next move." "Is it far?" Clara pressed, glancing out the window at the passing streetlights that flickered by. "Just a short drive," Mia assured her, turning slightly in her seat to meet Clara's gaze. "We'll be out of sight soon, I promise." As the car glided through the city, I couldn't shake the feeling that danger was never far behind. My mind raced with thoughts of Clara's past and the shadows it cast over her present. I could only imagine the fear and uncertainty that gripped her heart. What if they find us? Clara's voice was barely above a whisper, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "We have precautions in place," Tom replied, his tone calm but firm. "But you need to stay alert. We can't afford to be careless." I squeezed Clara's hand, wishing I could ease her fears with simple words. "We're going to be okay," I assured her. "You're not alone in this anymore." We drove in silence for a while, the tension in the car thick enough to cut with a knife. I glanced at Mia, who seemed to be deep in thought, her brow furrowed. I could sense that she was formulating a plan, a strategy to navigate the storm that lay ahead. After several minutes, Tom turned onto a secluded road that led into a dense forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting like gnarled fingers against the night sky. I felt a shiver run down my spine as we ventured deeper into the shadows, the car's headlights illuminating the path ahead. "This is it," Tom announced, pulling up to a modest cabin that appeared to be hidden among the trees. The exterior was unassuming, with weathered wood and a small porch, but I could tell this place had been fortified. Tom parked the car and turned off the engine. "We're here. Stay close and keep your voices down." Clara looked around nervously, the darkness closing in around us. "What if someone sees us?" "Just follow my lead," Tom instructed, opening the door and stepping out into the cool night air. We filed out of the car, and I could hear the rustle of leaves in the wind, a haunting reminder of the isolation surrounding us. Tom led the way to the front door, which he unlocked with a practiced ease. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly cozy, with a small fireplace and rustic furniture. But the atmosphere felt heavy, as if the walls held secrets of their own. "Welcome to our temporary refuge," Tom said, stepping inside. It's not much, but it will do for now. We can lay low here until we figure out our next steps. As I entered, I felt a mix of relief and trepidation wash over me. The warmth of the space was inviting, but the reality of our situation loomed like a storm cloud overhead. "Let's get settled," Mia suggested, taking charge. "Clara, you can use the bedroom in the back. It's quieter there." "Okay," Clara replied, her voice barely audible. She hesitated for a moment, looking around the cabin as if searching for reassurance. I gave her a gentle nudge, encouraging her to move forward. As Clara stepped into the bedroom, I followed her, wanting to ensure she felt safe. The room was simple, with a small bed and a window that overlooked the trees. I could see the tension in her shoulders begin to ease, if only slightly. "Are you okay?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe, keeping my tone soft. "I don't know," she admitted, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Everything feels so surreal. I never imagined my life would end up like this." I moved closer, sitting beside her on the bed. "You're stronger than you realize, Clara. You've survived so much already. We'll get through this together." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and fear. "What if I'm just dragging you into danger? What if they come after you too?" I shook my head. "You're not a burden. You're worth fighting for. We'll find a way out of this." As I spoke, I felt a sudden chill sweep through the room, the temperature dropping noticeably. I glanced around, a sense of unease creeping in. "Did you feel that?" Clara shivered slightly, nodding. "It's cold in here." "I'll check the window," I said, rising to my feet. I walked over to the window and peered outside. The forest loomed dark and silent, the shadows deepening as the wind whispered through the trees. "Everything looks clear," I assured her, but as I turned back to Clara, I noticed a fleeting expression of dread on her face. "What is it?" I asked, concern creeping into my voice. I can't shake the feeling that someone is watching us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I moved back to her side, trying to offer comfort. "You're safe here. We'll keep the door locked, and Mia and Tom are just outside. They'll make sure no one gets in." "I hope you're right," she replied, her gaze distant. As we sat in silence, I could sense the weight of Clara's past pressing down on her. She had been living in fear for far too long, and even though she was physically safe now, the shadows of her memories still haunted her. Moments later, Tom's voice echoed from the other room, breaking the tension. "We need to discuss our next move. Everyone, gather in the living area." I looked at Clara, nodding toward the door. "Let's go. We need to be part of this." She took a deep breath, steeling herself as we headed out into the main area of the cabin. Tom and Mia were standing by the fireplace, their expressions serious. "All right," Tom began, "we need to come up with a solid plan to get Clara a new identity and ensure her safety. It won't be easy, but we can't waste any time." Mia stepped forward, her eyes focused on Clara. "We'll start by creating a new persona for you, Clara. We need to change your appearance and gather the necessary documents. It's crucial we make you blend in." "Blend in?" Clara echoed, her eyes widening with uncertainty. "Yes," Tom said, nodding. "We'll work on giving you a new look, different hair, different style. It will help divert attention away from your past." "And what about the people after me?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. We'll put distance between you and them, Mia reassured her. You'll stay here until everything is set. We'll monitor the situation closely. I felt a surge of determination. Whatever it takes, we'll make this happen, I promised Clara, my gaze steady. You deserve to live without fear. Thank you, Clara whispered, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. As the conversation continued, I couldn't shake the feeling that the true danger was just beginning. The shadows of Clara's past were far from gone, and I knew that we were standing on the precipice of a storm that could change everything. The atmosphere in the cabin felt thick with anticipation, the fire crackling softly as we gathered around it. The dim light flickered, casting elongated shadows on the wooden walls. I could see the concern etched on Tom's face, a reflection of the gravity of our situation. Clara, we need to discuss your past, Tom began, his voice steady but firm. It's essential to understand who might be after you and why. Clara stiffened beside me, her eyes darting toward the door as if expecting an intruder to burst in at any moment. I don't want to talk about it, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. It's too painful. Mia stepped closer to Clara, her expression softening. I know this is difficult, but we need to protect you. Understanding what happened will help us come up with a plan. Taking a deep breath, Clara finally nodded. Okay, but I don't know how much help I can be. Start wherever you feel comfortable, I encouraged her gently, wanting her to know that we were all here for her. Clara's gaze fell to her lap, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. I used to work at a small gallery downtown. I thought I was safe there. But then, things changed. Changed how? Tom prompted, leaning forward with interest. There was this guy, Clara said, her voice trembling as memories rushed back. He was charming at first, but then he started getting possessive. I tried to break things off, but he wouldn't let me. He became obsessed. It turned dark quickly. Mia exchanged a glance with Tom, a look of concern passing between them. Did you report him? She asked. I did, but he was good at manipulating people, Clara continued, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The police didn't take me seriously. They thought I was overreacting. It escalated until I had to leave my job. What happened next? I asked gently, hoping to encourage her to share more. He followed me. I kept changing my routine, but he always seemed to know where I was, Clara said, her voice cracking. I felt like I was being watched, even while I was home. It drove me to paranoia. I stopped going out, but he still found me. My heart sank for her. I could only imagine the fear that must have consumed her life. Did you ever confront him? She shook her head. No, I was too scared. I thought he would hurt me if I did. But then one night, I saw him outside my apartment. I called the police, but when they arrived, he was gone. That must have been terrifying, Mia said softly, her voice filled with empathy. It was, Clara whispered. And then I met you, she said, looking directly at me. I thought maybe things would change, that I could start fresh. But now, I've dragged you into this. No, I replied firmly, shaking my head. You didn't drag me into anything. You deserve to have someone by your side who cares. We'll figure this out together. Clara smiled faintly, but the shadows of her past loomed large, overshadowing the flicker of hope. Thank you, she said, her voice stronger now. But I worry about the people I left behind. What if they come looking for me? We'll keep you safe, Tom assured her. You're not alone in this anymore, We have resources at our disposal and will track down any threats. I promise. The conversation shifted, and we began brainstorming ways to help Clara establish her new identity. I could see the determination in Tom's eyes as he laid out a plan. We need to create a new story for you, he said. A background that seems plausible. We'll give you a new name, a new history. What name? Clara asked, her brows furrowed in thought. Let's go with something simple yet different, Mia suggested. How about Emma? It's common enough, but it'll help distance you from your past. Emma, Clara repeated, testing the name on her tongue. I think I like that. Good. Next, we need to come up with a story, Tom said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. We can say you moved here from another city for a fresh start. Maybe you were an art student who decided to explore new opportunities. I can do that, Clara replied, a flicker of confidence igniting in her eyes. I can learn to paint again, focus on my art. That's the spirit, I said, feeling a surge of hope. Art has always been your passion. Use it to create your new life. As we continued to strategize, I could see Clara slowly beginning to shed the weight of her fears. The flicker of determination in her eyes warmed my heart, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. But as the night wore on, an uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. It was as if the darkness outside pressed closer, eager to breach our sanctuary. I glanced at the window, half expecting to see a figure lurking in the shadows. Do you think they know where we are? I asked, unable to suppress the worry creeping into my voice. Tom met my gaze, his expression serious. It's possible. We need to remain vigilant. If they're tracking Clara, they'll stop at nothing to find her. Mia nodded in agreement. We'll set up a lookout. One of us should always be on watch, just in case. Agreed, I said, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. I'll take the first shift. Let's make a schedule, Tom suggested, pulling out his phone to create a plan. We'll rotate every couple of hours. If we keep our eyes open, we can stay one step ahead. As we finalized the details, I couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that hung in the air. The night felt too quiet, too still, as if the world outside held its breath, waiting for something to happen. After a while, the conversation dwindled, and we each retreated into our thoughts. I could hear the distant rustling of leaves outside, and I couldn't help but feel that the forest was alive with secrets, whispering tales of the past. When the clock struck midnight, I excused myself, slipping out into the cool night air. The stars twinkled overhead, but the beauty of the scene was lost on me as I took up my post by the window. I stood watch, my heart pounding in my chest. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow that moved seemed to pull my attention. I strained my ears, listening for any signs of trouble, my thoughts drifting back to Clara. She was finally beginning to regain her spirit, and I couldn't let anything threaten that. Minutes turned into hours, and as the forest settled into an eerie stillness, I felt my mind begin to wander. I thought about the life Clara had left behind and the risks we were taking to protect her. Suddenly, a faint sound broke the silence, a crack of a twig, followed by a low whisper that sent chills down my spine. I turned sharply, my heart racing. I could have sworn I saw a figure lurking in the darkness, just beyond the tree line. Tom. Mia. I shouted, adrenaline surging through me as I rushed back to the living area. I think someone's outside. They were instantly alert, the atmosphere shifting as urgency filled the cabin. Tom grabbed a flashlight, and Mia pulled Clara close, her protective instincts kicking in. Stay behind me, Tom instructed, moving cautiously toward the door. As he swung it open, the night air rushed in, cold and foreboding. "Show yourself," he called out, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the darkness. I stood behind them, my heart racing as we waited in tense silence. The shadows shifted, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flash of movement. My instinct screamed for us to retreat, to lock the door and hide. But there was no going back now. "Is anyone there?" Tom demanded, stepping further into the night, flashlight scanning the area. Mia clutched Clara's arm, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Stay close to the cabin. We need to be ready to get inside." I could feel Clara trembling beside me, her fear palpable as she pressed closer to Mia. I wished I could shield her from whatever danger lurked outside. Then, just as I thought the night would swallow us whole, a figure stepped up from the shadows, a familiar face illuminated by the beam of Tom's flashlight. "Mark?" I gasped, recognizing the man who had helped me settle in when I first met Clara. "What are you doing here?" He looked around quickly, his expression urgent. "I came as soon as I heard. I couldn't just leave you all out here alone." "What do you mean? How did you find us?" Tom asked, lowering the flashlight slightly. "I've been keeping an eye on Clara's situation," Mark replied, his eyes darting to the trees. "And I'm worried. I think they've caught wind of where you are." I felt my heart sink as Clara gasped beside me. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "People have been asking questions," Mark said, glancing back toward the darkness. "They're searching for you. I came to warn you before it was too late." "What do we do?" Mia asked, her voice steady but urgent. "We need to leave," Mark replied, his eyes narrowing. "There's a safe route through the forest that I know. It's risky, but it's the only chance we have to get you out of here." Clara's eyes widened with fear. "I can't go back out there. What if they find us?" "We'll be cautious," Tom assured her. "But we can't stay here. If they know where we are, this cabin isn't safe anymore." Mark nodded in agreement. "I'll lead the way. Follow my instructions, and we'll get through this." As the reality of our situation sank in, I glanced at Clara, whose face was pale with fear. "You're not alone," I reminded her softly. "We'll stick together." With a newfound urgency, we prepared to leave the cabin behind. The night was far from over, and the shadows that had once felt like a sanctuary now loomed like a threat, ready to swallow us whole. As we stood in the doorway, the reality of what lay beyond the threshold felt overwhelming. The darkness of the forest loomed like a sentient entity, hungry and watchful. Clara's hands trembled as she clutched Mia's arm, her wide eyes darting nervously from Mark to the shadows. "Stay close," Tom instructed, his voice steady but firm. He stepped into the night, flashlight in hand, illuminating the path ahead. The beam sliced through the darkness, revealing twisted branches and the underbrush that rustled with the wind. I could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on us. Mark took the lead, gesturing for us to follow. "We'll stick to the tree line," he said, glancing back to make sure we were all in tow. "It's our best chance of staying hidden. Just stay quiet and move quickly." With the cold night air swirling around us, I felt the chill seep into my bones. As we began to move, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching us from the shadows. Every crackle of leaves and whisper of wind heightened my anxiety. "Is there a specific reason you're being hunted?" Mark asked Clara as we made our way through the dense underbrush. "Did you see anything that could have led them to you?" Clara hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. I might have seen him with someone else, and they might know I talked to the police. That's a risk we'll have to manage, Tom replied, his expression grim. But it's crucial that we stick together and keep moving. We navigated the forest in silence, the air thick with tension. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see a figure emerging from the darkness, a remnant of Clara's past. Each rustle of the leaves sounded like a warning, an echo of the danger we faced. Suddenly, Mark halted, raising his hand to signal us to stop. Listen, he urged, his voice low. We fell silent, straining our ears to the night. In the distance, the faint sound of footsteps crunched against the fallen leaves. My heart raced, pounding loudly in my ears, drying out everything else. Run, Mark whispered urgently. Now! We didn't need to be told twice. We sprinted deeper into the woods, the trees becoming a blur around us. Clara's breath came in quick gasps, and I could see the fear etched across her face as she struggled to keep up. Mia urged her forward, her voice a steady anchor in the chaos. Just a little further. We're almost there. The underbrush snagged at my clothes, branches clawing at my arms, but I pressed on, fueled by adrenaline and the instinct to protect Clara. The sounds of pursuit faded momentarily, but the fear of being caught propelled us forward. Where are we going? I gasped, trying to keep pace with Mark, who seemed to glide effortlessly through the darkness. To a safe spot, I know, he panted, glancing back to ensure we were all right. We can regroup and figure out our next move. We finally reached a small clearing, illuminated by the pale light of the moon. Mark motioned for us to huddle together, his breath coming in quick bursts. This is a good place to catch our breath. We can't stay long, but we need a moment to plan. Clara leaned against a tree, her face pale and drawn. What if they find us? She whispered, her voice trembling. We'll be ready, Tom assured her, his gaze steady. We've come this far, and we won't let them take you. I could see the fear in Clara's eyes, a mixture of desperation and hopelessness. I didn't want any of this to happen, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted a fresh start. Mark stepped closer, his expression softening. And you can still have that, Clara. But we need to stay alert and trust each other. Right, Mia said, determination shining through her fear. We'll get through this together. No one is leaving anyone behind. Taking a deep breath, I forced my racing heart to steady. What's the plan? I asked, my voice firm. Mark glanced around, assessing the surroundings. We'll head toward the river. It'll mask our sounds, and there's a path that leads to a small town a few miles away. We can find a place to hide and regroup. Will they follow us? Clara's voice quivered, anxiety spilling over. They might, Mark admitted, but we'll have the advantage of surprise if we stick to the shadows. Just keep moving and don't look back. We took a moment to catch our breath, the adrenaline still coursing through our veins. I looked at Clara, her features illuminated by the moonlight, and felt a surge of protectiveness. She was strong, even if she didn't see it. Let's go, Tom urged, breaking the tense silence. We don't have time to waste. We slipped back into the trees, the night closing in around us once more. The rustling of leaves and the distant call of night creatures accompanied our flight. The urgency of our escape kept me focused, but a nagging fear gnawed at the back of my mind. As we moved deeper into the woods, I felt a sense of foreboding creep in. Every sound felt amplified, every shadow seemed to pulse with life. My instincts told me to keep moving, but the weight of the unknown pressed heavily on my chest. After what felt like hours of navigating the underbrush, we finally reached the riverbank. The water glistened under the moonlight, reflecting the stars like shards of glass. The sound of the flowing river provided a momentary sense of calm, but I knew it was only temporary. "We'll follow the river upstream," Mark said, scanning the area. "It'll lead us to the town eventually." We moved quickly, our feet splashing softly in the shallows. Clara stumbled once, and I quickly steadied her, offering her my arm. "I've got you," I assured her, my heart racing in sync with hers. As we walked, the quiet of the night was suddenly shattered by distant voices, harsh, urgent whispers echoing through the trees. My heart sank. "They're close," I murmured, panic flooding my veins. "Keep moving," Tom urged, and we quickened our pace, the rush of the river drowning out our footfalls. The voices grew louder, more frantic, and I could feel the heat of fear rising in my chest. I glanced back over my shoulder, half expecting to see shadowy figures emerging from the darkness, but there was nothing, just the oppressive silence that hung heavy around us. The tension was palpable, and I could feel Clara trembling beside me, her fear radiating like a beacon. "What if they catch up to us?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "They won't," I insisted, though I wasn't entirely convinced. "We just need to stay ahead." We rounded a bend in the river, and suddenly the sound of the water shifted. I squinted into the darkness, catching sight of movement ahead, a flicker of light filtering through the trees. "Do you see that?" I asked, pointing toward the glow. Mark nodded, his expression cautious. "Let's check it out. It could be a way to lose them." As we approached the light, I felt a mixture of hope and trepidation. The darkness of the woods had been closing in on us, and the thought of a safe haven filled me with urgency. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being watched. We crept closer, the light becoming clearer, a small cabin, seemingly abandoned, nestled among the trees. A faint glow emanated from the windows, casting eerie shadows on the ground. "Is it safe?" Mia whispered, glancing at Mark for reassurance. "We won't know unless we check," he replied, glancing at each of us in turn. "Stay close and be quiet." With hearts pounding, we approached the cabin. I felt a surge of adrenaline as we neared the door, half expecting it to creak ominously as we entered. But it stood ajar, inviting and yet filled with uncertainty. Mark gently pushed it open, revealing a dark interior. "Let's move," he urged, ushering us inside. "We need to see if we can make this our temporary refuge." As we stepped over the threshold, the smell of damp wood and decay hit us, a stark contrast to the freshness of the river. The cabin was dimly lit, the remnants of furniture shrouded in dust. I could feel the weight of silence pressing down, each creak of the floorboards echoing through the stillness. "Check for any supplies," Mark instructed, his voice low. "We might need food or water if we're stuck here." We began to search the cabin, moving cautiously as if the shadows themselves were alive. Clara and I shared a glance, a silent understanding passing between us. No matter how dire the situation, we would face it together. As I rummaged through a dilapidated kitchen, I found a small stash of canned goods, along with a rusty can opener. "I found some food," I called out, relief flooding my veins. "Great. We'll need whatever we can get," Tom replied, his voice sounding a little more assured. Mia and Clara were inspecting the living area, pushing aside old furniture to search for anything useful. I joined them, my heart racing as I spotted a dusty old trunk tucked away in a corner. "What's this?" I wondered aloud, kneeling to examine it. The trunk was weathered, its lock covered in rust, but it beckoned to me with a sense of mystery. "Open it," Clara urged, her curiosity piqued. With a swift movement, I pried the trunk open, the creaking sound echoing in the cabin. Inside, I discovered an assortment of old clothing, a few faded photographs, and, most unsettling, a small collection of worn dolls. Each doll seemed to stare back at me, their glassy eyes reflecting the flickering light. "What the hell?" I muttered, reaching for one. Its hair was disheveled, and its dress was tattered, but it felt strangely familiar, as if it belonged to someone I should know. "Put that down," Clara exclaimed, a hint of panic in her voice. I froze, my breath hitching in my throat. "Why? What's wrong?" "I don't know. It just gives me a bad feeling," she replied, stepping back as if the doll were alive. Tom and Mark exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. "Let's not linger on this," Mark suggested, his voice tense. "We need to focus on our safety." I reluctantly set the doll back in the trunk, glancing at Clara. "You okay?" I asked softly, hoping to reassure her. She nodded, though her eyes were still wide with unease. I don't like the feeling of this place." "I understand," I replied, a chill creeping down my spine. "But we can't let fear control us." We continued our search, gathering what little supplies we could find. The cabin's eerie atmosphere hung thick in the air, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. As we settled into a corner of the cabin, hearts pounding, I stole glances at Clara. She was trying to remain calm, but I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. "We'll figure this out," I whispered, reaching for her hand. "I promise." The night wore on, and outside, the forest hummed with the sounds of the unknown. Each creak of the cabin and whisper of the wind reminded me of the danger lurking just beyond our fragile sanctuary. But as I watched Clara, her determined expression mixing with fear, I knew one thing: we would face whatever came next together. We had to. As the stillness settled around us in the cabin, I couldn't help but feel the weight of our situation pressing down on my chest. The faint glow from a single flickering bulb cast long shadows on the walls, transforming the dusty interior into a theater of silhouettes that seemed to shift and sway with a life of their own. Each creak of the wooden floorboards beneath our feet echoed ominously in the quiet, reminding us of the dangers lurking outside. "I don't like this place," Clara said again, her voice trembling slightly. She was sitting on the floor, her knees drawn up to her chest as if trying to protect herself from the ominous air surrounding us. "It feels wrong." "Just breathe," I replied, trying to keep my anxiety at bay. I looked around the cabin, searching for anything that might give us a sense of safety or hope. "We need to find a way to barricade the doors." Mia stood up, glancing toward the window. "And what if they come looking for us? We can't stay hidden forever." She looked worried, her eyes darting nervously from one shadow to another. Mark stepped forward, his expression serious. "We'll have to take turns keeping watch. We can't let our guard down. If they're out there, we need to be ready." I nodded, realizing the gravity of our predicament. "I'll take the first watch," I offered, trying to project a sense of calm. "I'll wake someone else if I need help." "I'll join you," Tom said, his voice steady. "We should be prepared for anything." As the others settled into their makeshift resting spots, I could feel Clara's gaze on me. I turned to meet her eyes, searching for reassurance. "We'll be okay, Clara. Just focus on getting through tonight," I said, willing my voice to remain steady despite the turmoil in my chest. The two of us moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. The moonlight barely pierced the dense canopy of trees, but I could see the vague outline of the forest stretching endlessly beyond. My heart raced at the thought of what might be lurking just outside. "Do you really think they'll find us?" Clara whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. "I don't know," I admitted. "But if they do, we'll be ready. We have each other, and that has to mean something." She smiled weakly, but the fear in her eyes didn't fade. I could sense the storm of emotions swirling within her: fear, guilt, and uncertainty. It was a reminder of the dark past that had chased her into this very moment. "I just want to be free of this," she confessed, her voice breaking. "I want to escape everything I've done." "You will," I reassured her, my grip tightening around her hand. "We'll figure it out together." As we stood there, the silence of the cabin began to settle around us, creating a cocoon of temporary safety. I felt a strange sense of protectiveness wash over me, a determination to keep Clara safe no matter the cost. Tom and I moved to the door, quietly securing it with a heavy wooden chair. I glanced at the others, who were trying to find rest in the dim light. Mia was curled up in a corner, her eyes fluttering shut, while Mark leaned against the wall, his expression focused and alert. "Let's keep quiet," I said, casting one last look at Clara. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her head resting against the wall, her eyes flickering with anxiety. "We'll get through this." Time seemed to stretch as we kept watch. The sounds of the forest surrounded us, an occasional rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the flowing river nearby, each sound magnified in the stillness of the cabin. I tried to focus on the sounds of nature, but the tension was suffocating. After what felt like an eternity, Tom nudged me. "Why don't you take a break?" "I can handle it for a while," he suggested, glancing at Clara, who still seemed on edge. I hesitated, torn between the need for sleep and the fear of leaving Clara unguarded. "Are you sure?" "Yeah. I'll call you if anything changes," he assured me. Reluctantly, I nodded and moved back to the small living area, where Clara was still awake, her gaze distant. "Hey," I said softly, sitting beside her. "You should try to get some rest." She shook her head, her expression troubled. "What if they come while we're asleep?" "I can't let that happen." I sighed, knowing her fears were valid. "Then let's keep each other awake. You can talk to me." "What do you want to know?" she asked, a hint of curiosity breaking through her fear. "Anything," I replied, searching for a way to distract her from the horrors outside. "What do you miss most about your old life?" She paused, her eyes thoughtful. "I miss the feeling of being safe, of being normal. I used to think I had everything figured out." A sad smile flickered across her face. "Then everything changed." "Sometimes life throws unexpected challenges at us," I said, trying to sound encouraging. "But it's how we deal with those challenges that defines us." Clara met my gaze, her expression softening slightly. "I wish I had your strength. I feel so lost." "You're stronger than you think," I insisted, feeling a surge of determination. "You survived whatever it is that haunted you. That takes a lot of courage." A fleeting smile crossed her lips. "You really think so?" "I know so," I replied, feeling a connection deepen between us. "We'll get through this. I promise." Just then, a faint sound broke the calm, a soft thump from outside, followed by a rustle. My heart sank, and I glanced toward the door, my breath catching in my throat. "Did you hear that?" I whispered urgently. Clara nodded, her eyes wide with fear. What was it? I don't know, but we need to be ready, I replied, rising to my feet. Get behind me. Tom stepped forward, his expression tense as he joined me by the door. Stay quiet, he said, raising his flashlight, ready to defend our small sanctuary. Mark stirred, his eyes flashing open. What's going on? He asked, looking between us. I heard something outside, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to be alert. The silence felt heavy, the air thick with anticipation as we waited for the next sound. My heart raced as I scanned the shadows beyond the window, every instinct urging me to act. I could feel Clara's presence behind me, her unease palpable. And then, we heard it again, a low murmur, a whisper carried by the wind, drawing closer. My heart thudded violently in my chest. They're out there, I whispered, my throat dry with fear. What do we do? Mark nodded toward the back door. We need to prepare for the worst. If they break in, we'll need an escape route. Tom moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. I don't see anyone, but that doesn't mean they're not there. As we exchanged worried glances, the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices drifting through the trees. Panic rose within me, and I could see Clara's face pale with fear. What do they want? She breathed, the tremor in her voice echoing my own dread. Whatever it is, they won't get it, Mark replied firmly, stepping closer to us. We fight for each other. That's our only choice. The murmurs became indistinct, rising and falling like a sinister melody, and the air was thick with tension. I felt trapped in a moment that could explode at any second. My mind raced with thoughts of escape, of how to protect Clara, and of the terror that lay just outside our fragile shelter. Stay close, I instructed, positioning myself between Clara and the door. We'll face this together. Just then, the front door creaked ominously, the wood straining against the weight of something outside. My breath hitched in my throat, fear coursing through my veins. The door slowly swung open, and darkness flooded the room, mingling with the trembling shadows. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, barely visible against the night. Who's there? I shouted, my voice trembling but defiant. The figure stepped forward, revealing a familiar face, one that filled me with dread. It was the man Clara had been trying to escape, his eyes gleaming with malice as he leaned against the doorframe. Did you really think you could hide from me? He taunted, his voice a low growl that sent chills down my spine. The figure loomed in the doorway, his presence darkening the cabin like a storm cloud blotting out the sun. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as recognition flickered in her eyes. I felt the blood drain from my face, the terrifying reality of our situation crashing down around me. Get back! I shouted, instinctively stepping in front of Clara, my heart racing as adrenaline surged through my veins. I had never seen this man, but I knew he was the embodiment of everything she had fled from. Don't be foolish, he sneered, taking a step forward. The dim light caught the sharp edges of his face, emphasizing the cruel smile that twisted his lips. I've come to bring her home. Clara's not going anywhere with you, I growled, feeling a protective instinct awaken deep within me. The cabin felt smaller with him there, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Is that so? He replied, his voice dripping with mockery. You think you can keep her safe? She's just a scared little girl playing house. She's always been mine, and she'll always be mine. Clara's eyes darted between us, panic and hurt swirling in her expression. You don't understand. I'm not yours, she cried, her voice trembling. I escaped from you. You can't control me anymore. His laugh echoed in the silence, cruel and cold. Oh, Clara. You really think you can escape your past? It's a part of you, no matter how far you run. I could feel the heat of anger bubbling up inside me, the urge to protect Clara overwhelming my fear. Leave her alone. I shouted, taking a step forward, my fists clenched. You have no power here. He smirked, his confidence radiating off him like a dark aura. Power? You think you can stand between me and what I want? I could have you both begging for mercy before the night is over. As he stepped into the cabin, I instinctively moved closer to Clara, shielding her from his approach. Tom and Mark shifted, positioning themselves defensively as well, ready to confront the threat head-on. Stay back, Tom warned, his voice low and dangerous. You're not welcome here. Welcome, the man scoffed, his amusement palpable. This is my territory now. You think you're safe in this little wooden box? You're wrong. I felt a surge of fear mixed with determination. You won't take her. Not now, not ever. He paused, studying me with a predatory gaze. And what will you do? Fight me? You have no idea what you're up against. I could see the danger in his eyes, the dark secrets that lurked beneath the surface. But I also saw Clara's resolve strengthen. She stepped forward, her chin lifted defiantly. You have no hold over me anymore, she said firmly. I'm not the person you think I am. Ah, but you are, he countered, his voice dripping with condescension. You'll always be my little puppet, dancing to my tune. Suddenly, he lunged toward Clara, and my instincts kicked in. I moved in front of her, adrenaline propelling me forward as I shoved him back. He stumbled but quickly regained his footing, a fierce glint in his eye. What are you going to do? He taunted, circling around us like a predator. You think you can protect her from me? You're making a grave mistake. Clara, go! I shouted, my heart pounding as I faced him down. Get to the back door. She hesitated, fear gripping her as she glanced between us. No, I can't leave you. Just go. I yelled, desperation flooding my voice. I'll hold him off. You have to escape. Mark moved to the window, glancing outside. We need to get out of here now. He won't hesitate to hurt us. Tom grabbed a nearby chair and swung it at the intruder, trying to buy us a moment. Get moving, he yelled. The chair shattered against the man's side, but he barely flinched, his smile widening as he caught Tom's gaze. Is that all you've got? He mocked, shrugging off the blow. You're pathetic. In that moment, I felt a surge of fury that overshadowed my fear. I lunged at him, tackling him to the ground. We crashed onto the wooden floor, the impact sending shockwaves through my body. I grappled with him, my hands gripping his collar as we struggled for control. Clara, go now! I shouted again, but my voice was muffled beneath the chaos. She finally moved, rushing toward the back door, but the man's laughter echoed in my ears as I fought to pin him down. You really think she'll escape? You think she can outrun her demons? Tom and Mark joined the fray, trying to help me hold him down, but he was strong, his movements fueled by a dark energy that seemed almost supernatural. The cabin shook with the intensity of our struggle, the walls closing in around us. Get off me, he snarled, throwing me aside with surprising force. I landed hard against the floor, gasping for breath as he scrambled to his feet. "Clara, hurry!" I shouted, trying to regain my footing. The air felt heavy with tension, the energy shifting as we prepared for another round. Suddenly, Clara screamed from the back door. "It won't open. He's locked it." My heart raced as I turned, realizing the threat had just escalated. "What?" I shouted, panic creeping into my voice. "Get out any way you can." Mark pushed against the intruder, trying to hold him back. "We can't let him get to her." The man laughed again, a chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You're all trapped here with me. And you're going to regret ever crossing me." Clara struggled with the door, fear etched across her face as she pulled and pushed against it, but it wouldn't budge. The darkness seemed to close in, the weight of our predicament bearing down on us like a shroud. "Tom, help her!" I shouted, urgency spiking in my chest. I turned my attention back to the man, preparing for the next move. "I will break you," he growled, eyes blazing with fury. "You should have stayed away from her." Tom rushed to Clara's side, using his shoulder to slam against the door, but it held firm, the ominous laughter of the intruder echoing through the cabin. "Come on!" Clara cried, desperation spilling into her voice as she pounded on the door, her fists trembling with fear. "Open, damn it!" I glanced between them and the intruder, realizing we were losing time. "If we can't get out, we have to fight him," I said, steeling myself. "We can't let him take her." Mark nodded, determination replacing the panic in his eyes. "Together, then. We have to do this." The intruder took a step forward, his expression shifting from amusement to fury. "You think you can win? You're all going to suffer for this." I moved to flank him, keeping my focus sharp. The cabin felt charged with an energy that was almost palpable, a prelude to the chaos that was about to erupt. "We will fight for our lives," I declared, my voice steady. "You won't win this." Clara finally gave up on the door, her expression fierce as she turned back to the intruder. "You don't control me anymore," she said, her voice rising with newfound strength. I felt a surge of pride for her, and I knew in that moment we were fighting not just for our lives, but for our freedom from the past that had haunted her for so long. "Bring it on," I said, taking a step forward, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead. The air in the cabin crackled with tension as we stood united against the intruder, our hearts pounding in unison. I felt Clara's fear mingling with her determination, and it fueled my own resolve. This was no longer just a fight for survival, it was a battle against the shadows of her past, and I would not let her face it alone. The man's eyes glinted with malice as he surveyed us, sizing up the situation. "You think you can take me on?" he taunted, a sneer curling his lips. "You're just kids playing with fire." "Maybe," I shot back, "but we're not afraid of getting burned." With that, he lunged forward, a blur of motion as he aimed for me. I sidestepped just in time, feeling the rush of air as his hand swiped past me. The force of his movement sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I quickly pivoted, grabbing a nearby lamp from the table, its ceramic base cool against my palm. "Clara, stay back," I shouted as I swung the lamp at him, the impact reverberating through my arm as it connected with his shoulder. He staggered but quickly recovered, his eyes narrowing with fury. "You think you can hurt me?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't know what I'm capable of." Clara's eyes widened, and for a brief moment, I saw the flicker of fear that threatened to engulf her. "No! Don't!" she cried, but I could not let him get to her. "Not now! Tom! Mark!" I called out, urging them to flank him. We need to pin him down. They moved quickly, coordinating their efforts as they converged on the intruder. Tom swung a chair toward him again, and this time it caught him off guard, crashing into his side and sending him sprawling against the wall. "Now!" I shouted as we lunged at him, desperate to subdue him before he could retaliate. I could feel the weight of our fear pressing down on us, but determination surged within me. We were fighting not just for our lives, but for Clara's freedom. The man thrashed beneath us, his strength surprising even as we managed to pin him down. "You think you've won?" he spat, breathing heavily. "This isn't over. You don't know who you're messing with." "Maybe not," I replied, my heart racing as I held him down, "but we're not going to let you take her." His laughter echoed through the room, chilling and hollow. "You're naive," he said, his voice laced with contempt. "This is just the beginning." I glanced at Clara, her face pale but resolute, and in that moment, I knew we had to end this. "Mark, tie him up. We need to keep him from getting to her," I urged, my mind racing with possibilities. Mark quickly grabbed some rope from a nearby shelf, the tension thickening as we struggled to keep the intruder immobilized. Clara stepped forward, her fear transforming into fierce determination as she joined us. "Don't let him control you," she shouted, her voice ringing with authority. "You're stronger than he thinks." With Mark holding the intruder down, I wrapped the rope tightly around his wrists, my hands shaking slightly as I secured the knots. Each twist of the rope felt like a small victory, a step toward reclaiming the freedom Clara had fought so hard to achieve. "Let's get him into the other room," Tom suggested, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We can't risk him getting loose." As we struggled to lift him, the man's laughter continued, a haunting sound that echoed in my ears. "You really think this will end well for you? You're all going to regret this," he hissed, venom dripping from each word. Ignoring his taunts, we dragged him toward the small bedroom off the main room, the space cluttered with forgotten memories and dust. The air felt heavy with dread, and I could sense the weight of Clara's past pressing down on us. "Keep him in there," I instructed, my voice firm. "We can't let him out until we figure out what to do next." As we shoved him into the room and slammed the door shut, I leaned against the wall, catching my breath. "What now?" I asked, looking at my friends and Clara, my heart still racing. "We need to call the police," Tom said, his expression serious. "He could be dangerous." Clara shook her head, her expression resolute. "No. I can't involve the police. They won't understand. They'll think I'm the problem." "Clara, this is serious," Mark urged, frustration creeping into his voice. "He's already threatened you. We can't just let him go." "But what if he finds out where I am? What if he comes after me again?" Clara's eyes glimmered with unshed tears, her vulnerability laying bare before us. "Then we'll make sure he doesn't," I said firmly, taking her hands in mine. "We'll figure this out together." She looked at me, a mix of fear and gratitude swirling in her gaze. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me. I'd rather face the darkness with you than let you go through this alone," I replied, squeezing her hand gently. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from the other room, jolting us from our moment of connection. The intruder was still thrashing against the door, trying to break free. "Quick! What do we do?" Mark exclaimed, his eyes wide with urgency. "We need to reinforce the door," I said, racing to the doorframe, heart pounding. "Tom, help me with this chair." As we shoved the chair against the door, Clara's voice trembled. "What if he gets out?" "He won't," I promised, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. We'll hold him off. The sound of wood splintering echoed in the room as the intruder continued to struggle. You're wasting your time, he shouted, a mixture of rage and amusement evident in his voice. You can't keep me here. We'll see about that, I muttered, my heart racing as I glanced at Clara. Stay close to us. Just then, Clara's expression shifted, her brow furrowing as she glanced at the window. What if he has friends? What if they're waiting outside? A cold shiver raced down my spine as I considered the possibility. We can't let our guard down, I replied, determination flooding my veins. We have to stick together. Mark nodded, stepping closer to Clara, his protective instinct evident. We'll get through this, I promise. The intruder's laughter echoed again, more menacing than before. You think you're safe? You're all just pawns in my game. No, I shot back, my voice rising. We're not playing your game anymore. As we braced ourselves against the door, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on us. The cabin, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. Shadows danced along the walls, mocking our every move. The thrill of fear twisted in my gut as I realized just how dire our situation had become. Clara, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, we need to talk about what he wants from you. The more we know, the better prepared we'll be. She nodded, her expression serious. He's always been obsessed with me. He thinks he can control my life, but I won't let him anymore. What does he want? Tom asked, glancing between us. Power, Clara replied, her voice trembling. He thinks he can use me to get what he wants, to manipulate me into doing his bidding. Then we can't let him succeed, I said, resolve hardening in my chest. We have to fight back, not just physically, but mentally. Just then, the intruder slammed against the door again, the chair shifting slightly. You're all fools, he roared. You think you can hide from me? I will find you, and when I do, you'll wish you'd never crossed me. Shut up. I yelled back, my heart racing. I could feel the pressure of the situation closing in on us. The night was heavy with uncertainty, the weight of the unknown pressing down like a vice. We exchanged determined glances, the understanding that we had to confront this darkness together. The cabin may have felt like a prison, but we would not let fear dictate our actions. The stakes were higher than ever, and I could sense that the battle for Clara's freedom was just beginning. The intruder's relentless pounding against the door reverberated through the cabin, a haunting reminder of the chaos we faced. My heart raced as I tried to calm the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in my mind. How did we get here? And more importantly, how are we going to escape? As the chair shifted slightly under the pressure of his assault, I exchanged worried glances with Clara. I could see the shadows of her past creeping back into her mind, threatening to engulf her. I needed to keep her grounded, to remind her that she wasn't alone. Clara, I said softly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. What do you remember about him? Anything that could help us? Her eyes widened, the flicker of fear igniting a storm of memories. He used to follow me, but I thought he was gone for good. I thought I'd escaped him. Maybe we can use that, Tom suggested, his brow furrowed in concentration. If he's obsessed with you, there must be something he wants. We need to figure out how to turn that against him. Clara took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she recounted her past. He was always lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. He wanted to control me, to make me his puppet. I thought I could break free, but now, Her voice faltered, and I could see the shadows of doubt creeping into her expression. "You're stronger than you think," I said, my grip tightening around her hand. "He may have tried to control you before, but this time we have the advantage. We know what he wants." Mark nodded in agreement, his eyes narrowing as he listened intently. "We can outsmart him. If we anticipate his moves, we can turn this around." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the other room, causing my heart to leap into my throat. The intruder was growing increasingly desperate, his rage palpable. "You think you can keep me in here?" he screamed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. Stay focused," I shouted, turning back to Clara. "What else do you remember? Is there anything he said that could help us understand him?" She hesitated, the fear written across her face. "He always talked about power, about how he could give me what I wanted if I just let him in. He wanted to make me part of his world. That's it," Mark exclaimed, a spark of inspiration igniting in his eyes. "If he wants to manipulate you, we can use that against him. Let's create a trap, a way to lure him in." "Lure him in?" Clara asked, a mix of confusion and hope flashing in her eyes. "How?" I could see the wheels turning in Mark's mind as he formulated a plan. "We can play on his obsession. If he thinks he can control you again, he might let his guard down. But that's dangerous," Clara replied, her voice rising in panic. "What if it doesn't work? What if he turns on us?" "We'll have to be quick and careful," I reassured her, squeezing her hand tighter. "But it's a chance we have to take. He's not just a threat, he's also our key to getting out of this." The intruder's pounding intensified, rattling the door with each blow. "You think you can trap me? You're all just scared little children," he taunted, his voice a mix of anger and amusement. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." "We need to act now," I said urgently, glancing at the door. "Mark, can you find something we can use to create a diversion?" "On it," he replied, quickly scanning the room for anything useful. Clara and I exchanged a determined look, and I could see the fire igniting within her. She was ready to fight back. As Mark rummaged through the small kitchen area, I turned to Clara. "Remember, if we can make him believe he has the upper hand, it might just give us the window we need." Clara nodded, her fear slowly giving way to a fierce resolve. "Okay. I'll do my best to play along." "Good," I said, my heart racing at the prospect of facing our adversary head-on. "But we need to be careful. The moment he thinks he can take control again, we have to be ready to strike." "Here," Mark called out, holding up a large pot. "We can use this to create a noise, maybe distract him long enough to catch him off guard." "Perfect," I said, my mind racing with the possibilities. "Clara, we need to position ourselves close to the door. When he enters, we'll create the diversion and then surround him." The urgency of the situation was palpable as we prepared ourselves for the confrontation. My heart thundered in my chest, a relentless drumbeat that fueled my determination. I knew that this was not just about survival, it was about reclaiming Clara's life from the grip of her past. With a final glance at each other, we took our positions. Clara stood to the side, her expression a mix of courage and fear, while I positioned myself behind the door, ready to pounce at a moment's notice. Mark held the pot, poised to create the distraction we needed. "On 3, I whispered, my heart racing. 1, 2. The door rattled violently, the intruder's voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You think you can keep me out? I'll show you what happens when you cross me." 3. I shouted, and Mark swung the pot against the floor, creating a loud clang that reverberated through the cabin. The intruder hesitated for a split second, the sound momentarily distracting him. I seized the opportunity and yanked the door open, lunging forward with all my strength. "Get back!" I shouted as Clara and Mark surged into action, ready to restrain him. The intruder stumbled backward, momentarily disoriented by the noise and the unexpected assault. "What the?" he began, but I cut him off, grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back, forcing him to the ground. The adrenaline surged through me, each movement fueled by the urgency of our situation. "Now!" I yelled, and Clara joined us, her hand steady as she helped secure his wrists. Mark quickly grabbed the rope we had used earlier and bound the intruder's arms tightly, a look of fierce determination on his face. "You think this will hold me?" the man sneered, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You're just delaying the inevitable." "No," I said firmly, meeting his gaze head on. "This is where it ends. You don't control her anymore." The intruder struggled against the ropes, his expression a mix of rage and desperation. "You're going to regret this. I will find a way back in." "Not if we can help it," Clara replied, her voice steady and resolute. I could see the strength returning to her as she faced her tormentor, no longer the frightened girl he once manipulated. With the intruder secured, we breathed a collective sigh of relief, but I knew this was only the beginning. We had to figure out what he wanted and why he was back. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted, the oppressive weight of fear replaced by a fragile sense of hope. "Now what?" Tom asked, glancing around the room as we caught our breath. "What do we do with him?" "We can't let him go," Clara said, her voice firm. "He'll just come after me again. We need to keep him here until we can figure out how to deal with him." I nodded, still catching my breath. "But we need to stay vigilant. He's unpredictable, and we can't underestimate him." The intruder's laughter echoed again, low and menacing. "You think you can keep me here? You're all fools. I will make you pay for this." Ignoring his threats, I focused on Clara, my heart swelling with pride. "You did well," I said softly, squeezing her hand again. "You faced him head on, and that takes real strength." Her eyes softened, a mix of vulnerability and determination. "I couldn't have done it without you guys. We're in this together." With the intruder restrained, we quickly secured the door to the room, creating makeshift barricades to ensure he wouldn't escape. The tension in the air remained thick, but we had taken a crucial step toward reclaiming Clara's life from the shadows of her past. "Let's figure out what we can do next," I said, glancing at each of my friends. "We need to make a plan to ensure he doesn't come after you again." As we huddled together, the weight of the night hung heavily on us. The darkness outside seemed to close in, the threat of the unknown still lurking in the corners of our minds. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me. We were not just fighting for survival, we were fighting for Clara's freedom, and together we would face whatever darkness awaited us. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the cabin was engulfed in an eerie twilight, shadows creeping along the walls as if trying to escape the darkness that loomed outside. We gathered around the intruder, now slumped on the floor, his eyes glinting with a mixture of fury and something else, perhaps desperation. I could see the contours of fear beginning to take shape within him, a stark contrast to the bravado he had displayed moments before. "Let's keep the pressure on," I said, trying to maintain our advantage. "Clara, you know him better than we do. What are his weaknesses?" Clara shifted uncomfortably, her gaze flickering between the intruder and us. He's arrogant. He always thought he was one step ahead. If we can make him believe he's lost control, it might throw him off. Good, Mark replied, taking a step closer to the intruder, his posture asserting dominance. We need to play on that. Keep him talking, Clara. Let him reveal himself. With a deep breath, Clara approached the intruder, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. What do you want from me? She asked, her eyes locked onto his. You can't control me anymore. A smirk played across his lips, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. You think you've escaped? I am always watching, always waiting. You belong to me, Clara. You will never be free of me. Not anymore, she shot back, her confidence growing as she stood tall. I have friends who will protect me now. You're just a shadow of my past. His smirk faltered, and I could see the anger boiling beneath the surface. You think they can save you? You don't know what you're up against. Then tell me, Clara pressed, her voice gaining strength. What do you want? Why are you here? He leaned forward, the ropes creaking against his movements. You know what I want, Clara. It's not just you. It's power. It's control. You're a piece of a much larger game. Game? Mark repeated, his brow furrowing. What do you mean by that? The intruder laughed, a low, menacing sound that echoed in the dim light. You think you're playing hero? You have no idea how deep this goes. There are others like me, other shadows lurking in the dark, waiting for their chance. What are you talking about? I demanded, stepping forward, the weight of his words settling in my stomach like a lead weight. Who are these others? Do you really think you can save her? He sneered, tilting his head as if studying us. You're merely pawns in this game, just as she was. It's only a matter of time before you're all consumed. I could feel the air grow heavy with tension as the realization dawned on us. This was not just about Clara. It was about something much larger, something dark and menacing. What do you know? I pressed, determined to extract more information. The intruder leaned back against the wall, his expression one of smug satisfaction. I know more than you could possibly understand. You're in way over your heads, and soon you'll regret crossing me. I exchanged a glance with Mark, the urgency of our situation pressing down on us like a weight. We need to act, I said, my voice firm. We can't let him manipulate us any longer. Agreed, Clara added, her eyes fierce. We need to figure out how to turn this around. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted from outside, causing us all to jump. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the cabin's walls. It was as if nature itself was warning us of the danger lurking beyond. Stay close, I instructed, my heart pounding. We need to make sure he doesn't have any surprises up his sleeve. As the howling wind mixed with the sound of branches scraping against the cabin, I felt a chill creep down my spine. The atmosphere shifted, a sense of foreboding washing over us. This was not just a confrontation, it was a battle for survival against an unseen force. Let's move him to a more secure location, Mark suggested. We can't risk him escaping. Right, I agreed, and together, we hoisted the intruder up, dragging him to a back room. The darkness felt thicker here, the shadows more oppressive, as if the cabin itself was alive, watching us. We quickly secured him to a sturdy chair, tying his legs to the frame and ensuring he couldn't escape. Now what? Clara asked, glancing around the dimly lit room. Now, we dig deeper, I replied, trying to steady my racing heart. We need to know what we're up against. We can't let fear control us. Fear is what keeps him powerful, Mark said, his voice low. If we can break that power, we can turn the tide. I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. We can't give him the satisfaction of seeing us afraid. Clara, stay strong. We'll figure this out together. As we settled into a tense silence, the atmosphere was thick with uncertainty. The intruder glared at us, a mixture of disdain and anger etched across his face. You think this is going to work? He scoffed. You're only prolonging the inevitable. Then we'll just have to make sure you never get the chance, Clara shot back, her voice unwavering. In that moment, I realized that Clara was beginning to reclaim her power. She was no longer the terrified girl hiding from her past. She was fighting back, and together, we would ensure that her dark history wouldn't dictate her future. As the wind howled outside, the reality of our situation settled in. We were trapped in this cabin, facing an enemy who thrived on fear. But we were determined to confront the darkness together. Let's start with the basics, I said, addressing the intruder. Who are these others you mentioned? What are you involved in? His laughter echoed again, low and mocking. You think I'll just tell you? You're not worthy of the knowledge. Then we'll make you talk, Mark said, stepping closer, his voice low and dangerous. You don't get to decide how this ends. Try all you want, the intruder sneered, his eyes narrowing. You'll never break me. We'll see about that, I said, a spark of defiance igniting within me. We had the upper hand now, and I was determined to use it to our advantage. As the tension in the room thickened, I couldn't shake the feeling that the true horror was still to come. We were on the precipice of something much darker, and I could sense the shadows closing in around us. The fight for Clara's freedom was only just beginning. The atmosphere in the room thickened, almost tangible, as I locked eyes with the intruder. His defiance was palpable, but so was the sense of dread that crept into my mind like a dark fog. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to swell and shift, twisting into shapes that echoed the fear we were all feeling. Mark leaned in closer to the intruder, his voice low but firm. You think you can intimidate us? We're not afraid of you. We've faced worse. The intruder chuckled, a hollow sound that sent a chill down my spine. You think this is intimidation? You have no idea what real fear is. He paused, leaning forward as if to share a secret. Fear is the puppet master. It pulls the strings and makes you dance. Clara stepped forward, her posture strong. You don't control me anymore. I'm done living in your shadow. Her voice trembled slightly, but she quickly steadied herself, meeting his gaze with newfound courage. Ah, but shadows are persistent, he replied, a twisted grin creeping across his face. You can try to escape, but I will always be there, lurking just out of sight. You can't run from your past, Clara. I sensed the tension rising as Clara's resolve flickered for just a moment. You don't know anything about me, she shot back, her voice now fierce. I'm stronger than you think. Strength? Is that what you call it? He sneered, his eyes narrowing. You're fragile, just like all the others. You'll break. And when you do, I'll be waiting to collect what's left of you. Mark clenched his fists, and I could feel the anger radiating off him. We're not going to let you manipulate us. You may have had control once, but this is different. You're outnumbered. Oh, but you see, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. You're mistaken if you think this is just about me and you. The web I've woven is vast and intricate, and you've stumbled right into the center. What do you mean by that? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The implication of his words was heavy, and I could feel my heart racing. What web? He leaned back, a self-satisfied smirk plastered on his face. Let's just say there are many who would love to get their hands on someone like Clara. I'm merely the harbinger of a much larger darkness. What darkness? Clara demanded, her voice cutting through the tension. You're nothing but a coward hiding behind threats. Cowardice? He echoed, his laughter ringing in my ears. You'll come to understand what it truly means to be afraid. There are forces at play that you can't even begin to comprehend. This isn't just about you, Clara. It's about an entire network, a cult of shadowy figures who revel in control and chaos. Cult? Mark interjected, furrowing his brow. What kind of cult? The intruder's eyes sparkled with a mix of malice and excitement. A cult that thrives on fear, manipulation, and power. They seek to claim souls like yours, Clara, to feed their insatiable hunger. You think you've escaped, but you've only drawn their attention. As his words hung in the air, a heavy silence enveloped the room. The implications were staggering. This was bigger than just Clara and her past. It was about a collective darkness, an unseen enemy that could reach out and snatch at the fabric of our lives. What do they want? I pressed, my voice firm despite the turmoil in my mind. Why would they want her? Power, of course, he replied, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Clara possesses something unique, something they crave. And now that you've drawn attention to yourselves, you're all in danger. I could feel the weight of his words settle over us like a heavy fog. We need to get out of here, I said, urgency creeping into my tone. If this is true, we can't stay. We need a plan. Where will you go? He taunted, his eyes glinting. You think running will save you? The shadows are already hunting you, and they won't stop until they get what they want. Clara's breathing quickened, panic flashing across her features. We can't let them take me. I won't go back to that life. Mark placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We won't let that happen. We'll figure this out together. As we huddled together, the reality of our situation pressed down on us like an iron weight. The intruder's words echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the lurking danger. I felt a deepening dread, knowing that we were not just fighting a single adversary, we were up against a vast, sinister force that thrived on fear and manipulation. The wind outside howled again, rattling the windows, and I glanced nervously at the door. We need to secure this place, I said. We can't let him escape, and we have to fortify our defenses against whatever is out there. Clara nodded, determination flickering in her eyes. What if we use this to our advantage? She suggested, her voice steadier now. If we can lure them in, we might have a chance to turn the tables. Mark raised an eyebrow. Lure them in? You mean like a trap? Exactly, Clara replied, her confidence growing. If they're looking for me, we can use that to our advantage. But we need to know how they operate. The intruder's expression shifted, his amusement turning to caution. You're playing a dangerous game, Clara. You have no idea what you're dealing with. They are relentless, and they will not hesitate to destroy you. Then we'll be ready for them, I said, feeling a surge of determination. We can't let fear dictate our actions. We have to confront this darkness together. Brave words, he sneered. But courage without knowledge is futile. Then tell us what you know, Clara challenged, crossing her arms defiantly. You're clearly involved in this mess. What do we need to prepare for? He paused, a flicker of contemplation crossing his features. Very well, he said slowly, almost reluctantly. But understand this, once you step into the abyss, there's no turning back. Tell us, Mark urged, his tone demanding. The cult I spoke of, there are those who can summon dark entities, creatures that prey on fear and despair. They have their eyes on you now, Clara. They'll come for you, and when they do, you'll need to be ready. As he spoke, I could see Clara's resolve hardening, her fears transforming into a fierce determination. Then we'll fight back. I refuse to be a pawn in someone else's game. We'll make a plan, I said, my voice steady. We need to gather information, set traps, and prepare for whatever comes next. Good luck, the intruder replied, a smirk creeping back onto his face. You'll need it. But remember this, the shadows are always watching. As the reality of his words settled over us, I felt a shiver run down my spine. We were on the brink of a battle we had never anticipated, a confrontation with forces beyond our comprehension. But we were determined to fight, to push back against the darkness that threatened to consume us. The wind howled outside, rattling the cabin walls, and I could feel the tension in the air building, as if the very elements were aware of the impending storm. With Clara at our side, we would confront whatever darkness lay ahead. Together, we would forge our path through the unknown, ready to face the shadows that awaited us. The air in the cabin felt electric, charged with uncertainty and fear. I could hear the wind whipping against the windows, each gust sounding like a warning. Outside, the forest loomed, dark and unwelcoming, as if it were hiding secrets just beyond our reach. I could sense the weight of the intruder's presence, and his words hung in the air like a noose, tightening around us. Let's get to work, I said, trying to shake off the creeping dread. If they're watching, we need to prepare. Mark began rummaging through the cabinets, searching for anything that could serve as a weapon or tool. Clara stood beside me, her eyes flickering with a mix of determination and fear. What should we do first? She asked, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside her. We need to secure this place, I replied, feeling the urgency of our situation. Let's check all the windows and doors, make sure everything is locked tight. If the cult is as powerful as he says, we can't afford to leave any openings. Clara nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. And we should set up some kind of warning system. If they come, we need to know before they get too close. Mark emerged from a cabinet with a rusted frying pan, wielding it like a sword. This might not be much, but it's better than nothing, he said, flashing a nervous grin. I'll check the windows. As he moved around the cabin, I took a deep breath, trying to quell the rising panic. I could feel the weight of the intruder's gaze on me, a predatory gleam in his eyes as he watched our every move. You're going to need more than that to protect yourselves, he called out, his tone dripping with mockery. But go ahead, pretend you have a chance. Shut up, Clara snapped, her voice firm. We're not afraid of you. You may think you know us, but you're underestimating our strength. Strength? He echoed, a chuckle escaping his lips. You'll find that bravado doesn't mean much when faced with real darkness. It devours the brave just as easily as it does the timid. Mark returned from checking the windows, shaking his head. They're all secure for now, but we need to do more than just barricade ourselves in here. If they're as relentless as he says, we need to be proactive. Agreed, I replied, glancing at Clara. We should set some traps, something to slow them down if they try to break in. And we should also figure out how to communicate with each other without drawing attention. Clara's eyes brightened at the suggestion. What about using the old walkie-talkies I saw in the living room? They might still work. Good thinking, I said, moving to the living room. As I rummaged through the cluttered shelves, I found 2 old walkie-talkies covered in a layer of dust. These might do the trick. They'll let us stay in touch if we have to split up. I handed one to Clara and kept the other for myself, testing the connection. Can you hear me? I asked, my voice crackling through the device. Loud and clear, Clara replied, her tone confident. Mark joined us, a determined look on his face. Let's set a plan in motion. We'll split up tasks. Clara, you can work on setting up the traps. I'll take care of fortifying the doors and windows. And I'll keep an eye on our guest here. The intruder scoffed, his expression mocking. You really think you can outsmart me? Go ahead and waste your time on pathetic little traps. You'll learn soon enough that you're playing a game you can't win. Ignoring him, we set to work. I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through me, bolstering my determination. With each task completed, I felt a flicker of hope growing within me. Clara was actively fighting back, and with Mark by our side, we stood a chance, however slim it might be. I moved back to the kitchen, gathering supplies to create makeshift traps. The wind continued to howl outside, and I could hear the distant sound of branches snapping under the strain. The darkness encroaching outside felt alive, as if it were waiting for us to falter. As I worked, I glanced at Clara, who was focused on tying fishing line around the cabin's perimeter. Do you think we can really stop them? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She paused, meeting my gaze. I don't know, but we can't just sit here and wait for them to come. We have to fight back, even if it's just a chance to delay them. Her resolve struck a chord within me. You're right. We have to believe that we can turn this around. After a while, we regrouped in the living room, having accomplished as much as we could. The cabin felt more fortified, but I still sensed an underlying tension. The intruder watched us with keen interest, his eyes gleaming with a sinister light. You really think this will stop them? You're just prolonging the inevitable. I stepped closer, forcing myself to meet his gaze. If we can buy ourselves time, then maybe we can find a way to expose your little cult. We will find a way to break free from this. He smirked, the corners of his mouth curling in amusement. You think you're the first to try? Many have come before you, believing they could escape. They all failed. I can assure you, the shadows are relentless. I felt a chill wash over me at his words, but Clara stood tall beside me. Then we'll be the ones who succeed. We're not alone in this fight. Mark nodded, his eyes steely. You may have your darkness, but we have each other. And that's a power you'll never understand. The intruder leaned back, a look of feigned boredom on his face. Your camaraderie is adorable, but it won't protect you. When the shadows come, you'll wish you had heeded my warnings. Ignoring him, I turned to Clara and Mark. We need a plan for the worst-case scenario. If they break in, we need to know how to defend ourselves. I can use the kitchen knives, Mark suggested. They're sharp and can do some damage if it comes to that. Clara nodded. And we should keep the walkie-talkies on so we can communicate if we're separated. Suddenly, the intruder burst out laughing, a cold, hollow sound that sent shivers down my spine. You really think knives and walkie-talkies will save you? How quaint. You have no idea what's out there, Do you? Then enlighten us, I challenged, crossing my arms. What are we really up against? He leaned forward, his expression shifting from amusement to something darker, more sinister. The cult I spoke of doesn't just send their members. They summon beings from beyond, a force that thrives on despair. And they won't stop until they've claimed what they desire. A knot tightened in my stomach. And that's Clara? Exactly, he said, his smile widening. They want her soul. She's the key to unlocking something much larger, something you can't even begin to comprehend. Clara stepped forward, defiance radiating from her. You won't get me. I refuse to be a pawn in your game. The intruder's laughter echoed through the cabin, a sound devoid of warmth. Brave words, but they won't protect you from what's coming. As the wind howled outside, I felt the shadows closing in, wrapping around us like a shroud. The sense of foreboding was palpable, and I could feel the darkness pressing in on all sides. We have to prepare for anything, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. We'll fight together. We'll find a way to break this curse. Clara nodded, her eyes fierce. Together, we're stronger. We'll face whatever comes our way. Mark's determination echoed in his gaze. Let them come. We won't back down. As we stood together, the weight of the intruder's words loomed over us, a reminder of the challenges ahead. But in that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. We were not just fighting for Clara, we were fighting for our lives, our futures. And we would not go down without a fight. The tension in the cabin grew thicker as the wind howled outside, lashing against the walls like a wild animal. Each gust rattled the windows, a reminder that the world beyond was turning against us. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows that danced on the walls, creating the illusion of figures moving just out of sight. Let's take shifts keeping watch, I suggested, glancing at Clara and Mark. We can't afford to be caught off guard. I'll take the first watch, Clara said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. I want to keep an eye on that creep. I nodded, thankful for her courage. Just remember to use the walkie-talkie. If anything seems off, call for us. Mark set up a makeshift barricade by the front door, piling chairs and the heavy coffee table against it. This should slow them down if they try to break in, he said, glancing over his shoulder. But I don't think it'll stop whatever they're summoning. Let's not think like that, I replied, feeling the dread creeping back in. We have each other. We can fight this. As Clara settled into a chair near the front window, I felt a surge of protectiveness. She was the heart of our small group, and her safety meant everything. I pulled Mark aside, lowering my voice. We have to prepare for the worst. If this cult is as dangerous as he says, we can't underestimate them. I know, he replied, furrowing his brow. We should set some traps around the cabin, something to alert us if they try to come in through the back or the windows. I nodded, and together we gathered supplies, nails, ropes, and anything else we could find that might serve as an effective alarm. The work helped focus my mind, channeling my fear into something productive. As we worked, the sound of Clara's voice broke through the quiet. I can't believe we're actually doing this, she said, her tone wavering slightly. It feels like a nightmare. We'll wake up from it soon, I called back, trying to sound confident. Just keep your eyes peeled. We're not going to let them take you. Hours seemed to stretch on as we set the traps and reinforced the cabin. The wind continued its assault, creating an unending chorus of creaks and groans from the old wood. My skin prickled with the sensation of being watched, an unsettling feeling that I couldn't shake. As the candle burned low, Clara finally called for us. "I think I saw something outside," she said, her voice tense. Something moved in the shadows. Mark and I exchanged glances, adrenaline surging through me. "What did you see?" I asked, moving closer to her. "I'm not sure," she replied, her brow furrowed. It was quick, like a shadow darting between the trees. But there was something off about it. It felt alive. "Just a trick of the light," Mark said, though his voice wavered. "We can't let our imaginations run wild. We need to stay focused." I placed a reassuring hand on Clara's shoulder. "You're doing great. Just keep an eye out. If anything else happens, let us know." She nodded, but her eyes betrayed her fear. "I don't want to see them. I don't want to see anything at all. We won't let anything happen to you," I promised, a surge of determination coursing through me. "We're in this together." As the hours dragged on, Clara continued to watch, while Mark and I took turns fortifying our defenses. Each creak of the cabin felt amplified, every gust of wind a reminder of the danger lurking just outside. We set up a few more traps, stringing lines across doorways and placing bells near the windows. It felt foolish, but the act of preparing gave us a sense of control. When it was my turn to keep watch, I settled into the chair beside Clara. "You did a good job," I told her quietly. "Thank you for holding it together." She offered a weak smile, though her eyes were still clouded with fear. "I'm trying, but I can't shake this feeling that something terrible is coming." "I know," I replied, glancing out into the darkness. The trees loomed like sentinels, their branches swaying menacingly. But we're ready for it. We've planned, and we have each other. Silence enveloped us, and the only sound was the distant rustle of leaves. I could feel the weight of her fear, and I wanted to reassure her, to shield her from whatever lay ahead. But deep down, I felt that we were not just battling an external threat, we were confronting the shadows within ourselves. As the night dragged on, fatigue began to gnaw at my resolve. Clara's eyes drooped, and I knew she needed rest. "You should sleep," I urged her gently. "I can keep watch for a while longer." "I don't want to leave you alone," she replied, a hint of desperation in her voice. "What if they come while I'm asleep?" "We'll hear them," I insisted, hoping to sound more convincing than I felt. "And if anything happens, I'll wake you up." She hesitated, but finally nodded, the fight in her fading as sleep threatened to overtake her. "Okay, but promise me you'll wake me if anything changes." "I promise," I said, watching as she settled back into her chair, her breathing slowing as sleep took her. Alone now, I leaned back, staring into the darkness. The shadows felt alive, creeping closer as the candle flickered. My thoughts drifted to the intruder and his ominous warnings. What kind of cult were we truly up against? Were they capable of summoning something as malevolent as he claimed? The weight of uncertainty pressed down on me. I couldn't let fear consume me. We had to stay strong, stay vigilant. As the candle burned low, I felt a sudden chill wash over me, an icy finger running down my spine. I shot up, scanning the shadows. "Clara?" I whispered, but she remained still, lost in her dreams. The chill deepened, and a low, guttural growl echoed from the woods beyond the cabin. My heart raced as I strained to listen, every muscle in my body tensing. It sounded like something unnatural, a sound that shouldn't belong in this world. I grabbed the walkie-talkie and pressed the button, my voice trembling. "Mark, can you hear me?" Something's out there. Silence met my words, and a wave of panic crashed over me. Where was Mark? I had to know if he was safe. Then, the sound came again, closer this time. I could hear the rustling of leaves, the snapping of twigs underfoot. It wasn't the wind. It was something else, something alive. Mark. I called, my voice cracking. I didn't want to leave Clara's side, but I had to make sure we were prepared. I stood, my legs shaking as I approached the door. I had to see what was happening. Just as I reached for the handle, the door rattled violently, as if something outside was trying to get in. I jumped back, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of nails scraping against wood sent terror coursing through me. Clara! Wake up! I shouted, my voice hoarse with urgency. She bolted upright, fear etched on her face. What's happening? I don't know, but we need to be ready. I shouted, racing to the windows. I could see shadows darting between the trees, fleeting glimpses of movement that sent chills down my spine. I grabbed the frying pan from the kitchen and handed it to Clara. Here, just in case. She took it with trembling hands, her eyes wide. What are we going to do? We'll wait and see what happens. If they break in, we'll fight. We can't let them take you. The door rattled again, louder this time, the sound echoing through the cabin. I moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. The shadows shifted, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a figure, tall, cloaked, moving with an unnatural grace. Clara, stay behind me, I ordered, feeling a surge of protectiveness. I raised the frying pan, my heart racing as I prepared for the worst. The door rattled once more, a deep, threatening sound that sent my pulse racing. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the noise stopped. The cabin fell silent, the oppressive weight of the darkness closing in around us. What was that? Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know, I replied, my heart pounding in my ears. But we need to be ready for anything. As the silence stretched on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The shadows pressed closer, and I felt the air grow heavier, suffocating. Mark! I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. Where are you? But there was no response, only the rustle of the wind outside. The unsettling silence stretched on, and I felt the walls closing in. Clara's hand gripped my arm, and I could see the fear in her eyes. What if he's not okay? What if they got to him? We can't think like that, I said, forcing myself to sound calm. He's strong. He'll be back. We just need to hold on a little longer. But deep down, I felt the shadows closing in, felt their hunger for despair. And I knew that we were running out of time. The silence pressed down on us like a heavy blanket, each second stretching into eternity. I kept glancing toward the door, half expecting it to burst open and unleash whatever horrors lay outside. Clara remained by my side, her grip on the frying pan tightening as she stared at the entrance, her eyes wide with fear. Maybe we should check on Mark, she suggested, her voice shaking. What if he's in trouble? I don't want to leave you alone, I replied, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. But we can't just wait here. If he's in danger, we need to help him. Clara hesitated, glancing toward the door as if she could see beyond it. We'll go together, she finally said. We can't split up. Not now. With a nod, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. We made our way to the door, every creak of the floorboards sounding like a scream in the oppressive silence. I reached for the handle, my hand shaking, and turned it slowly. The door swung open with a loud creak, revealing the dark, empty porch. The wind whipped around us, carrying the scent of damp earth and leaves, but no sign of Mark. I peered into the darkness, straining to see through the thick veil of night. The trees loomed ominously, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. "Mark," I called, my voice echoing into the void. "Are you there?" Silence. Clara stepped closer, her body tense beside me. What if they got him? What if he... Stop! I interrupted, forcing down the rising panic. We can't think like that. He's out there somewhere. Taking a cautious step onto the porch, I squinted into the shadows. Let's check the back. If he went out to check something, he might have gone that way. Clara nodded, her face pale, and we moved cautiously along the side of the cabin, our footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of leaves. The moon was hidden behind clouds, casting everything into deep darkness. The world felt strange, as if time had warped and reality hung by a thread. As we rounded the corner, the back of the cabin came into view, and I felt a chill sweep over me. The back door was ajar, swinging slightly with the wind, and a faint light flickered from inside. "Mark?" I called again, but my voice cracked, the fear creeping back into my chest. Clara grabbed my arm, her eyes wide. What if he didn't leave it open? What if something came in? I shook my head, unwilling to let fear take control. "We have to see. Stay close to me." With a deep breath, I pushed the door open wider, the hinges creaking in protest. The light came from a lantern on the table, illuminating the small space but casting long shadows that danced menacingly around us. I scanned the room, searching for any sign of Mark. "Mark?" I called again, this time more firmly. But there was no answer. Clara moved forward, her brow furrowed. He should be here. He wouldn't just leave without saying anything. I stepped into the room, the air thick with tension. Maybe he went to check the traps, I suggested, though the thought felt hollow. We should look for him. As we searched the small cabin, my heart raced with each passing moment. The kitchen was empty, the living area devoid of any sign of life. My stomach churned with unease. It felt as though the shadows were closing in on us, tightening their grip, and I could sense something lurking just out of sight. Suddenly, Clara gasped, pointing toward the window. "Look!" I turned, my heart sinking. The glass was smeared with something dark, streaks of red that glimmered ominously in the lantern light. I rushed to the window, pressing my palms against the cool glass. "Is that blood?" Clara's voice trembled, and I could see her pale reflection staring back at me, horror etched on her face. "I don't know," I muttered, panic threatening to overtake me. I turned to the door. "We need to get out of here. We need to find Mark." But just as I moved to leave, a low growl echoed from outside. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It was the same guttural sound I had heard earlier, now closer, more pronounced. "Did you hear that?" Clara whispered, her eyes wide with fear. I nodded, my heart racing as I gripped the frying pan tightly. "We can't stay here. We need to get outside. If he's in trouble, we can't wait any longer." With a surge of determination, I pushed open the back door, stepping into the cool night air. The woods were darker than I remembered, the trees looming like ancient sentinels. My pulse quickened as I listened, trying to discern the sounds of the night. "Mark!" I shouted again, my voice trembling with urgency. "Where are you?" But again, silence met my call. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves above us, but it felt like a warning rather than a comfort. The shadows shifted around us, twisting in unnatural ways, and I could feel the weight of something watching us from the depths of the forest. "We should go back inside," Clara said, her voice shaking. "This isn't right. We're not safe out here." I hesitated, torn between the need to find Mark and the instinct to retreat to safety. "I can't leave him," I replied, my voice firm. "We have to keep looking." Clara nodded, though fear clouded her eyes. "Okay, but we stick together. No matter what." We ventured further into the darkness, the flashlight illuminating the path ahead. The further we walked, the more the woods seemed to close in around us. Shadows danced among the trees, and every rustle sent a jolt of fear through my body. "Where would he have gone?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I admitted. "But we need to check the traps we set. If he went to check them, he might be nearby." We moved deeper into the trees, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. I could feel the oppressive atmosphere weighing down on us, a sense of dread that clung to my skin. The shadows seemed to twist and curl, and I fought the urge to turn back. "Over here," I called suddenly, spotting one of our traps. The rope lay slack, the bell silent. But as I approached, my heart dropped. There was no sign of Mark. "Do you think he got caught?" Clara asked, fear evident in her voice. "I don't know," I replied, scanning the surrounding area. "But we have to keep looking." We pressed on, each step feeling heavier than the last. The darkness seemed to throb with a life of its own, and I could feel the air thickening with something sinister. The shadows moved, and I thought I saw figures lurking just beyond the edge of the light. Then, the growl came again, low and guttural, reverberating through the trees. This time, it was closer, almost like a taunt. "Please, let's go back," Clara urged, her voice trembling. "Not yet," I insisted. "We can't leave him. He needs us." But just as I spoke, a chilling scream pierced the night, echoing through the forest. It was Mark's voice. I froze, terror washing over me. "That's him," I shouted, adrenaline surging through my veins. "We have to go." We ran toward the sound, fear propelling us forward. My heart pounded in my chest as I pushed through the underbrush, the flashlight beam flickering in the dark. Clara was right beside me, her breath coming in quick gasps. The trees seemed to close in as we raced forward, and I could feel the darkness closing around us. The shadows twisted and curled, shifting just beyond the edge of the light. "Mark," I called, panic rising in my throat. "Where are you?" But there was no response, only the echo of our footsteps and the haunting silence that followed. Suddenly, we broke through the trees into a small clearing. The moonlight bathed the area in a silvery glow, but the sight before us froze me in place. Mark lay on the ground, his body twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood pooled around him, glistening in the pale light. My heart sank, a wave of horror crashing over me. "Mark!" Clara screamed, rushing to his side. I followed, disbelief choking me. As I reached him, I felt a rush of despair. His eyes were wide open, filled with a terror that sent a chill through my bones. "What happened?" Clara cried, shaking him gently. "Mark, wake up. but it was too late. I knelt beside them, my hands trembling as I pressed my fingers against his neck, searching for a pulse. But there was nothing, only the cold touch of death. Panic surged through me. "No, no, no!" I whispered, my heart breaking. "This can't be happening." The shadows around us began to shift, moving closer, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I looked up, and in the distance, I saw them, figures cloaked in darkness, emerging from the trees, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Clara's arm and pulling her back. "We have to get out of here." We stumbled backward, my heart racing as I scanned the clearing for an escape. The figures advanced slowly, their movements fluid and eerie, as if they were gliding through the shadows. Clara clutched my hand, her eyes wide with fear. "Where are they?" she whispered. "I don't know," I replied, my voice trembling. "But we can't stay here." We turned and ran, tearing through the underbrush, branches clawing our skin as we fled. The growls echoed behind us, haunting and sinister, and I could feel the darkness closing in. "Keep going," I urged, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "Don't look back." We dashed through the trees, the flashlight flickering as we stumbled through the night. The sounds of pursuit grew louder, a chorus of growls and whispers echoing in the darkness. But just as I thought we might escape, I heard it, the snap of a branch beneath my feet. I fell, tumbling to the ground, and Clara screamed. "Get up," she shouted, panic rising in her voice. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing, but the shadows were closing in. I could see the glowing eyes, the figures moving closer, and a sense of terror gripped me. "Clara!" I shouted, reaching for her as she turned to help me. But before I could grab her hand, the darkness surged forward, engulfing us. The last thing I saw was Clara's terrified face, the shadows swallowing her whole. The darkness enveloped me like a shroud, suffocating and cold. I felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through my veins as I stumbled through the shadows, the echoes of Clara's scream ringing in my ears. My heart raced, each beat a desperate plea for escape. "Clara!" I called, my voice cracking in the thick silence. "Where are you?" But there was no response, only the haunting rustle of leaves and the distant growls that seemed to mock my fear. The weight of despair pressed down on me, wrapping around my chest like a vice. I strained my ears, hoping to hear her voice, but the forest remained ominously still. I forced myself to move, adrenaline propelling me forward. The flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams of light that danced among the trees. Shadows stretched and twisted, forming shapes that seemed to leer at me from the darkness. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, stalked by something unseen. I pushed deeper into the woods, desperation driving me. "Clara!" I shouted again, my voice echoing into the void. "I'm coming for you." But my calls were met with silence, and the deeper I ventured, the more I felt the presence of the dark figures behind me. The growls had faded into whispers, a chilling chorus that wrapped around me like a fog. They were close, too close. I stumbled through the underbrush, branches snagging at my clothes, tearing at my skin. Panic surged through me as I recalled the last moments before the darkness consumed us. Clara's face, etched with fear, haunted me, fueling my determination to find her. "Clara!" I yelled again, but my voice felt weak, swallowed by the vastness of the night. As I continued to push through the trees, I spotted a flicker of movement to my left. I spun toward it, my heart racing. Clara? But it was just a shadow, flitting between the trunks, disappearing before I could reach it. The woods felt alive, pulsing with an eerie energy that made my skin crawl. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm even as panic clawed at my insides. I needed a plan. I had to find a way to outsmart whatever was hunting us. The cabin, if I could make it back, maybe I could barricade myself inside. Pushing through the thicket, I made my way back toward the clearing where we had lost Mark. The path was treacherous, and I stumbled several times, my flashlight flickering ominously. Just as I thought I was nearing the clearing, I heard a soft whimper, a sound that sent ice coursing through my veins. "Clara?" I called softly, my heart pounding. The whimpering grew louder, echoing through the trees. I followed the sound, my heart racing with hope and fear. I needed to find her. As I rounded a bend, I saw her slumped against a tree, her hair disheveled and her face pale. Relief washed over me, and I rushed to her side. "Clara!" But when I reached her, my heart sank. Her eyes were wide with terror, but they didn't focus on me. They were locked on something behind me, and the look of pure horror on her face sent a chill down my spine. "Run," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're coming." Before I could react, she scrambled to her feet, and I turned just in time to see the shadows surge toward us, their forms swirling like smoke, tendrils reaching out with a life of their own. My heart raced as I grabbed Clara's hand, pulling her toward the path we had come from. We ran, the shadows hot on our heels, their growls growing louder. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of voices urging us to succumb to despair. "Keep going," I shouted, but Clara was struggling to keep up. "Where do we go?" she cried, her breath coming in gasps. "Just keep running. We need to reach the cabin." We burst through the trees and into the clearing, the moonlight illuminating the desolation before us. The cabin stood ominously, its windows dark, but it felt like our only chance. I pulled Clara toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. "Get inside. Barricade the door." We rushed into the cabin, slamming the door shut behind us. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the lock, my pulse pounding in my ears. Clara was already pushing furniture against the door, her eyes darting nervously toward the windows. "Do you think they'll get in?" she asked, fear etched on her face. "I don't know," I replied, trying to stay calm. "But we have to hold them off. Just keep quiet." We huddled in the living room, the shadows outside swirling like a storm. I could hear the growls, low and guttural, punctuated by the whispers that seeped through the cracks in the walls. "Where are they?" Clara whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know," I replied, my heart racing. "But they're not human. There's something else." I glanced around the room, searching for anything we could use to defend ourselves. The lantern still flickered on the table, casting eerie shadows across the walls. I grabbed it, holding it tightly as we waited in silence, the darkness pressing in around us. Suddenly, the door rattled, the force sending a tremor through the floor. I spun toward it, my breath catching in my throat. "They're trying to get in." Clara stepped closer, her eyes wide with fear. "What do we do?" "Stay back," I ordered, gripping the lantern tightly. I positioned myself in front of the door, ready to defend us against whatever was on the other side. The rattling grew louder, and the whispers turned into a deafening roar, filling the cabin with a cacophony of dread. I felt my grip tighten around the lantern, ready to use it as a weapon if needed. The door suddenly burst open, and I barely had time to react as the shadows poured into the cabin, their forms twisting and writhing like smoke. The lantern's light flickered, illuminating their grotesque shapes, bodies that were half-formed, faces twisted in eternal anguish. "Clara!" I shouted, but she was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. In that moment, instinct kicked in. I swung the lantern, the glass colliding with the nearest shadow, and it let out a shriek that echoed through the cabin. The light flared, illuminating the room, and I felt a surge of power as the darkness recoiled. "Run!" I yelled, pushing Clara toward the back door. We stumbled backward, fighting our way through the shadows that clung to us like smoke. The whispers grew louder, a relentless chorus urging us to give in, but I forced myself to push forward. As we reached the back door, I flung it open and we burst into the night, the cool air hitting me like a splash of cold water. The shadows followed, their growls echoing in the darkness, but we ran, sprinting into the woods once more. "Where do we go?" Clara gasped, glancing back at the cabin, the shadows spilling out like a wave. "Anywhere but here," I replied, dragging her forward. We dashed through the trees, the flashlight beam cutting a narrow path ahead. The growls followed us, a chilling reminder of the darkness pursuing us. I could feel the shadows closing in, their whispers echoing in my mind, trying to convince me to give up. But I refused to listen. I could feel Clara's hand in mine, and that was enough to keep me going. We stumbled into a small clearing, and I skidded to a halt, panting heavily. "We can't keep running forever," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "Then what do we do?" Clara replied, her eyes darting around for any sign of safety. I scanned the area, my mind racing. We have to fight back. We can't let them take us. If we can find a way to push them back, maybe we can escape. "Escape?" Clara echoed, her voice trembling. "But how? They're everywhere." I looked at her, determination flooding through me. "We can't let fear control us. We have to find a way to confront them. If we can create a barrier, something that will keep them at bay, maybe we can survive this." As I spoke, a flicker of hope ignited in Clara's eyes. "You mean like fire?" They seemed to react to the lantern's light. "Exactly," I said, feeling the idea take root. "If we can find something to burn, we can create a barrier." Just then, I noticed a pile of dry leaves and branches nearby, remnants of an old campfire. "Over there!" I shouted, pointing to the pile. "Help me gather everything we can find." We hurried to the pile, collecting as much as we could. The shadows loomed closer, their whispers growing louder, but I focused on the task at hand. My hands shook as I gathered the leaves, the darkness pressing against me like a weight. Once we had a sizable pile, I turned to Clara. "We need a spark. Do you have anything?" "Just my lighter," she exclaimed, fumbling in her pockets. "It's all I have." I took it from her and held it tightly, my heart pounding in my chest. "When I light it, we'll need to throw it on the pile quickly. It has to catch fire." Clara nodded, fear etched across her face. "I'm ready." I positioned myself next to the pile, ready to ignite it. The shadows crept closer, their forms undulating and twisting in the dark. I could hear the growls intensifying, a chilling reminder of the threat looming before us. "On 3, I said, my voice steady despite the fear surging within me. 1, 2, 3. I flicked the lighter, the flames springing to life. I held it close to the dry leaves, watching as they caught fire, the flames licking upward. "Now!" I shouted, tossing the lighter onto the pile. The fire erupted, flames dancing and crackling as they consumed the dry leaves. The shadows recoiled, shrieks of fury erupting from their depths as the light filled the clearing. "Keep feeding it," I yelled, grabbing more branches and tossing them onto the fire. Clara joined me, her hands trembling but determined. We fed the flames as the shadows writhed, their forms twisting in agony as the fire blazed. The fire roared to life, illuminating the clearing, pushing back the darkness that threatened to engulf us. I could feel the heat on my skin, the light driving the shadows away, and for the first time, a sense of hope surged within me. "Is it working?" Clara asked, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "Yes. Keep going," I urged, throwing another handful of branches onto the fire. The shadows hissed, retreating further into the trees as the flames crackled around us. I could hear their whispers turning to wails, a cacophony of rage echoing in the night. But just as I thought we might have a chance, I felt a cold gust of wind whip through the clearing. The fire flickered, shadows dancing in and out of view. I glanced around, unease creeping back in. "Clara, stay close," I shouted, my heart racing. The shadows surged forward again, but this time they were different, more aggressive, more focused. I could feel the malevolence radiating from them, a palpable hunger that sent chills down my spine. "Get behind me," I ordered, positioning myself in front of Clara, ready to protect her. The shadows lunged, tendrils reaching out toward us, and I swung my arm, trying to ward them off. The fire crackled, but it was struggling against the encroaching darkness. I felt the heat begin to wane, the shadows threatening to snuff out the light. "Keep feeding the fire," I shouted, desperately tossing more branches into the blaze. But it wasn't enough. The shadows swarmed, and I could see the hungry faces forming in the darkness, eyes glowing with malice. They were closing in, the whispers growing louder, drowning out everything else. "Clara, we need to run," I yelled, fear clawing at my throat. "But the fire," she started, but I grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the edge of the clearing. "We can't stay here," I shouted. "We need to find another way." We sprinted toward the trees, the shadows snapping at our heels. The fire flickered behind us, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. I could hear the growls, the whispers, the sound of darkness pursuing us, and I pushed Clara forward. We burst into the trees, the underbrush tearing at our legs, branches scratching our skin. I could hear the shadows crashing behind us, their fury palpable, but we pressed on, adrenaline fueling our escape. "Where do we go?" Clara panted, glancing back as the shadows loomed closer. "Just keep running," I urged, my breath coming in ragged gasps. But then we stumbled upon a cliff, the ground dropping away into darkness. Panic surged through me as I skidded to a halt, pulling Clara back just in time. "Look," she shouted, pointing toward a narrow ledge that jutted out from the cliffside. Without thinking, I grabbed her hand and led her toward it. "We can climb." We scrambled onto the ledge, our feet slipping as we clung to the rocky surface. The shadows surged below us, howling with rage, but we had a moment of reprieve. I looked back at the cliff edge, the darkness swirling just out of reach. "Hold on tight." We began to climb, our fingers scraping against the rock, adrenaline coursing through our veins. With each step, I could feel the presence of the shadows pressing in around us, but we pushed forward, desperate to escape. As we climbed higher, the sounds of the shadows faded slightly, replaced by the sound of rushing water. "We're near the river," Clara shouted, hope igniting in her eyes. "Just a little more." I replied, pulling us up to the top. Finally, we reached the edge, collapsing onto the ground. I took a moment to catch my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. But as I glanced back, the shadows were still there, swirling and beckoning, their whispers filling the air. "We can't stay here," I urged, looking at Clara. "Where do we go?" she asked, fear flashing in her eyes. "The river," I said, determination flooding through me. "If we can make it to the water, it might wash them away." Without another word, we scrambled toward the sound of rushing water, pushing through the trees. The shadows followed, their whispers growing more frantic, the growls intensifying. As we neared the riverbank, I could see the water flowing swiftly, the moonlight glinting off the surface. "There!" I shouted, pointing. We dashed toward the river, the shadows closing in behind us. The water churned below, dark and tumultuous, but it felt like our only chance. "Jump!" I yelled, pulling Clara toward the edge. We leaped into the water, the cold rushing over us, pulling us under. I felt the darkness swirl around me, but the current swept me away, carrying us downstream. I surfaced, gasping for air, and reached for Clara. "Swim!" I shouted, my voice barely above the roar of the river. She nodded, her determination shining through her fear. Together, we fought against the current, our arms flailing as we swam toward the shore. The shadows loomed behind us, but the water felt like a barrier, pushing them back as we clawed our way to safety. Finally, we reached the bank, dragging ourselves onto the shore, gasping for breath. The shadows hovered at the water's edge, their forms twisting and writhing, but they didn't cross into the river. "We made it!" Clara gasped, relief flooding through her. But my heart sank as I looked back at the shadows, their whispers still echoing in my mind. "It's not over," I said, my voice trembling. "What do we do now?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. "We need to find help. We can't stay here. We have to get back to town." Together, we turned away from the river, pushing through the trees toward the distant glow of lights. I could still hear the whispers trailing behind us, but I clung to the hope that we would escape. As we made our way through the woods, I glanced back one last time. The shadows were lingering at the riverbank, their forms dark against the moonlit water. But we were alive, and that was enough. We would find a way to fight back against the darkness that had pursued us. We would survive. The journey back to town was long and treacherous, but each step felt like a victory. With every stride, I could feel the weight of despair lifting, the shadows fading into the distance. Finally, we broke through the trees and stumbled into the town, the familiar streets illuminating our path. Relief washed over me, but a lingering sense of dread remained, knowing that the darkness could return at any moment. As we reached the edge of the town, I turned to Clara. "Are you okay?" She nodded, though her eyes were still filled with fear. "I think so. But what about them? What if they follow us?" I took her hands in mine, squeezing tightly. "We'll figure it out. Together." And as we walked into the light, I vowed to protect her, to fight back against the darkness that threatened to consume us both. The shadows may have lost this battle, but the war was far from over. The night air was thick with an unsettling stillness as Clara and I stood at the edge of town, the distant glow of streetlights casting long shadows behind us. The safety of the familiar streets felt like a mirage. The memories of the woods still clung to me, like a film of dirt I couldn't wash away. "Are you sure we're safe?" Clara's voice trembled as she wrapped her arms around herself, glancing back toward the dark woods. I think so, I said, though doubt not at me. The shadows had been relentless, their whispers echoing in my mind. But as we moved further into the town, a flicker of hope ignited within me. We need to find help. We can't face this alone. Together, we made our way to Clara's apartment, the familiar street signs bringing a sense of comfort I desperately needed. The moon hung high in the sky, a sentinel watching over us as we walked, but I could still feel the weight of darkness pressing against my back, a reminder of the horrors we had faced. Should we tell someone? Clara asked as we approached her building. About what happened? About the shadows? I hesitated, the memory of the dark figures sending a chill down my spine. I don't know. Who would believe us? It sounds crazy. But we can't just ignore it, she insisted, her eyes searching mine for answers. What if they come back? They might, I admitted, fear creeping back in. But we need to regroup. Rest. Figure out our next move. Clara nodded, though uncertainty lingered in her expression. We entered her apartment, the door clicking shut behind us with an unsettling finality. The familiar sense of home enveloped me, cooked pasta, fresh linens, and the faint scent of lavender from the candles she often lit. Do you want something to drink? Clara asked, moving toward the kitchen. Maybe some tea? Yeah, that sounds good, I replied, my heart still racing from our harrowing escape. As Clara busied herself with the kettle, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. The shadows had been relentless, but somehow we had fought them off. I could still hear their whispers echoing in my mind, each word a haunting reminder of the darkness that threatened to consume us. Do you think they'll find us here? Clara's voice broke through my thoughts, her gaze focused on the boiling kettle. I shook my head, trying to dispel the fear that had taken root. I don't know, but we'll be ready if they do. Clara returned with 2 steaming mugs, her hands trembling slightly as she set them down on the table. I just can't shake the feeling that this isn't over, she confessed, sinking into the chair across from me. Neither can I admitted, wrapping my fingers around the warm mug. The heat seeped into my palms, grounding me momentarily. But we need to come up with a plan. What kind of plan? Clara asked, her brow furrowing in concern. We need to find out more about the shadows. Maybe there are others who have experienced this. We can't be the only ones, I suggested, recalling the stories I had heard over the years, whispers of strange occurrences, people disappearing into the woods, never to return. Clara leaned forward, her eyes brightening with determination. We could research local legends. There might be something in the library or even online. Good idea, I said, a sense of purpose igniting within me. But we need to be careful. If these shadows are as powerful as they seemed, we can't let our guard down. The atmosphere in the room shifted as we talked, a blend of fear and resolve enveloping us. The shadows may have retreated for now, but their presence lingered, a dark specter hovering just beyond our reach. That night, we stayed up late, poring over old books and articles, uncovering tales of darkness that haunted our town. Legends spoke of a curse, of shadows that claimed those who wandered too far into the woods, luring them with promises of safety before dragging them into the abyss. I can't believe this, Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper as she read a passage about a group of hikers who had vanished without a trace. It's like a nightmare. It's real, I replied, feeling the weight of the words settle between us. And we need to be prepared. Days turned into weeks, and we delved deeper into the lore of our town, connecting the dots between the stories and our experiences. We met in Clara's apartment every evening, the shadows of the past still looming large but transforming from a source of terror into a catalyst for action. As we uncovered more about the dark forces that dwelled in the woods, our resolve only strengthened. We crafted a plan to confront the shadows, arming ourselves with knowledge and the tools we believed could protect us. "Do you really think this will work?" Clara asked one evening, a hint of doubt in her voice as she stacked the books we had gathered. "I don't know," I admitted, "but we have to try. We can't let fear dictate our lives." Finally, the day came when we felt ready to return to the woods, armed with candles, salt, and a handful of protective herbs we had read about in the texts. As we stood at the edge of the forest, the familiar trees looming before us like silent sentinels, my heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. "Are you ready?" I asked Clara, glancing at her. She took a deep breath, her eyes shining with resolve. "I am. Let's end this." We stepped into the woods together, the shadows gathering like storm clouds overhead. As we moved deeper into the forest, the air grew heavier, thick with anticipation. The whispers began to swirl around us, their voices a chilling reminder of the darkness that lay in wait. "Stay close," I said, gripping her hand tightly as we pressed forward. With each step, I could feel the shadows stirring, a malevolent presence lurking just beyond our vision. I steadied my breath, determined to confront the darkness that had haunted us for so long. As we reached the clearing where we had faced the shadows before, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew still, and the whispers turned into a low hum, an eerie symphony of despair that echoed through the trees. "Here we are," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Light the candles," I instructed, my heart pounding in my chest. Clara hurried to set up the candles in a circle, their flickering flames casting an ethereal glow. I arranged the salt and herbs, forming a protective barrier around us. The shadows began to coalesce, swirling around the edges of the clearing, their forms shifting and morphing into grotesque shapes. The whispers intensified, filling the air with a cacophony of voices, each one urging us to succumb to despair. "Stand your ground," I urged Clara, my voice steady despite the terror that gripped my heart. As the shadows surged forward, I ignited the candles, the flames flaring to life, illuminating the darkness. The shadows recoiled, their forms twisting in agony as the light pierced the gloom. "Stay focused," I shouted, my heart racing. "We can do this." We stood together, the flickering flames creating a barrier between us and the encroaching darkness. The shadows writhed and hissed, their whispers morphing into howls of fury. "Why do you resist?" a voice echoed from the depths of the shadows, deep and resonant, chilling me to my core. "You cannot escape your fate. We will not be taken," Clara shouted, her voice strong and defiant. "We will fight." With that declaration, I reached for the herbs, scattering them into the air as Clara held the candles high. The light intensified, pushing back the shadows as they surged forward, their forms flickering like smoke in the wind. "Together," I shouted, our voices rising in unison. As we stood firm, a brilliant light exploded from the candles, enveloping us in warmth and energy. The shadows shrieked, retreating into the darkness, their forms dissolving like mist in the morning sun. But just as victory felt within reach, the shadows surged one last time, a final attempt to break our resolve. They lashed out, tendrils of darkness reaching for us, desperate to snuff out our light. "Clara, hold on," I shouted, grabbing her hand tighter. With a surge of determination, we focused our energy, channeling our fear into strength. The candles blazed brighter, the flames roaring to life, pushing the shadows back with a force that felt almost alive. And then, with one final burst of energy, the darkness shattered, exploding into a million particles of shadow that scattered into the night. The air cleared, and the oppressive weight that had hung over us lifted, replaced by a profound stillness. "We did it," Clara whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. I turned to her, the gravity of what we had just faced settling in. "We did," I breathed, relief flooding through me. "But we need to be vigilant. This could return." As we stood in the clearing, surrounded by the remnants of the battle, I knew the shadows might be gone for now, but the scars they left behind would linger. We had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but the journey ahead would require constant vigilance. Together, we turned back toward the path leading out of the woods, the moonlight guiding our way home. The shadows may have lost this battle, but the war was far from over, and as we stepped back into the light, I knew we would always be prepared to face whatever darkness lay ahead. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.